Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, and of course, as I always like to say, even though I don't know what it means, your existential Mr. Rogers. Shout out to Xevious one more time for this great piece of artwork. I am, of course, Robert Meyer Burnett, and you're watching Robservations. I'm Rob casting at you from the Robservatory. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of the Post-Geek Singularity. This is Robservations, the show about something, episode 419. And I'm going to dedicate this show, I have to dedicate this show to Trinidad the Island Man. Not only for supporting this channel above and beyond, I want to thank you for that, sir, sincerely. But I don't think that I would ever be in possession of such a stellar piece of clothing as I am about this vest. You know, I kept it in here. I kept it in the Robservatory, and I was wearing a t-shirt, a black t-shirt. I mean, I was gonna go chestless, show like my two pieces of chest hair. I don't know if the man boobs would have worked under this, can't tell, but I just had to wear it. I feel festive. It felt, it just felt right. So I want to thank Trinidad for sending this to me for my birthday, along with a whole box full of goodies, as I showed you. What a guy you are, but just stellar taste in clothes, sir. And I just want to point out, and I'll leave you guys to be the final arbiter, but look at this. Look at the color green, and look at my eyes. I mean, it's almost as if Trinidad thought to himself, that Burnett, I'm going to find him an island vest that's going to fill him with mirth and mayhem and wonderment. And it also matches his eyes. So thank you for that, Trinidad the Island Man. My God, I'm in love with this. I might just never take it off because it's a vest. You can put in undergarments and clean them off. Thank you very much for that. One thing off the top, as many of you know, I participated in the Mainframe Online Comic-Con a couple weeks ago. I was able to interview some pretty interesting people, and they're going to do another one. They're raising money for charity, but they're going to do another one at the end of the month. And people, I guess my interview skills had some good feedback. So they're doing the Mainframe Comic-Con 2.0. That is on May 30th and 31st at the end of the month. Now, I have to say, I had a blast doing this, and I thought that they really, it was really well organized. It was really well put together. I hold it in the highest regard. I think it was very worthwhile, and I really had a good time. They had some really great guests, and I said they said they had good feedback from the guests that I was interviewing, so they asked me to do it again, and I said 100%. I absolutely would do it. So I'm very excited for these guys that they are doing this again, and they had such great feedback, and it was fun. I mean, JMD Mateus, who I'm a huge fan of, got to hang out with him, talk to him for a while. It was great. Chief designer at Marvel, I got to talk. It was great. I really had a lot of fun, and I really appreciate what they're doing. And in terms of building community, as we all know, that's what this channel is all about. Happy to participate in other people's communities when they ask me. Thank you very much. And because now I can no longer promote the JBL Bar 9.1 giveaway because we gave it away, and that was pretty exciting. I can promote, hey, The Hills Run Red, a movie that I produced, a film I developed, a movie I worked on for 3 years. I know it's a low-budget horror slasher film and might not be everybody's thing, but we're less than a month away from the release of this Blu-ray, and all of the special features that I worked on and that director Dave Parker worked on were actually completed while we have been sheltering at home. So I will say, to be honest, I don't know if this would have been as chock-a-block full as it is had we not been stuck at home. I mean, it probably would have, because Dave Parker directed this and I produced it, and it was kind of our movie, so no one else was going to do it. But I'm very proud of this release. If horror movies aren't your thing, if you're interested in how a movie gets made, I think this Blu-ray has a lot to offer. The special features, the movie's only 81 minutes, but the special features, if you include the two extra commentary tracks, I mean, there's like a total of 8 almost 10 hours of special features on this disc, I believe. It's just there's 6.5 hours of new special features. So there you go. And if you can't shamelessly promote your own work, I mean, I get called a paid shill, or I get called a grifter on Twitter. What have I ever accomplished? So, if I'm not, blowing my own horn, who else is? But you know whose horns are blowing today? Yours. All of you imagination connoisseurs, for whatever reason, you guys are killing it with the letters. I was looking for something to discuss today, and I mean, let's face it, after all, it's Sunday. And these are the kind of lazy Sundays you're like, do I want to go on? Like, I've been talking a lot on the internet, and I've got work to do here in the Robservatory. I'm always upgrading things. I have a lot of stuff I want to move around, and I owe you guys the camera reverse of the actual Robservatory. And I've also been working on a new opening credit sequence for this show. I'm trying to upgrade it all, and the more room I have in here to operate, the better off it can be. And other people have asked me when the full Bill Syncovich interview is going up. That's going up. And I've put some feelers out to do other interviews with other people. So we'll see. And, because I interviewed David Goodman, I'm of the Writers Guild of America and also the executive producer of the Orville, I've been using that as a baseline. I've been sending that out as an example because I figured if I'm going to interview people and they'll give me their time, why not? I'm shooting for the moon with these interviews. We'll see if I can, what will come of all that, but we'll see. And hopefully I'll be bringing that to you. It'll be my, the Robservations summer interview series. I have no idea. We'll see. But I think I'm just going to start out today's show, and I'm just going to jump right into it. I got a lot of letters. I got a really interesting letter from the chairman, from Jeffrey Mao. And this was a response. He wrote this in the last 18 hours because it was a direct response to last night's Elizabeth's whining about movie show. Elizabeth, I showed her very first Godzilla movie, Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, the 6th Showa Godzilla film. It was made in 1965. It didn't make it to America until 1970, but it was always a favorite of mine as a little kid because it has aliens in it. And I know Destroy All Monsters has aliens in it, and I love the Mysterians have aliens, but putting together astronauts, spaceships, painted backdrops. I mean, Planet X had a Forbidden Planet-esque feel. Ghidorah, Rodan, Godzilla. Come on, what's not to love? But anyway, this was a great letter I got this morning from our own Jeffrey Mao. Dear Rob, you can read this letter on either Robservations or Elizabeth's. I chose to read it on Robservations because it's a longer letter than we've ever received on Elizabeth's. In fact, you can read it on both, as it applies to both shows. Maybe I will. Not all Robservers are Elizabethers, and vice versa. I have noticed that. This is in response, or rather just a commentary, on your last Elizabeth's where you guys watched and reviewed Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, a.k.a. Invasion of the Astro Monster. I'm not trying to dissuade Elizabeth about her opinions on the Godzilla Showa-era Daikaiju films, because let's be honest, they're really goofy. But I would say that you have to view them with the context, period, and culture in mind. You can appreciate how much Toho, Tanaka-san, Honda-san, and Tsuburaya-san put into the making of the films, as good as they were given the budgets and technology constraints of the time. Credit must also be given to Haruo Nakajima, who was the primary Godzilla suit actor during the era for his performances. Also, as you like to point out, there is a particularly Asian love of whimsy or cuteness that is not prevalent in the West, at least not among adults. That does permeate through the Godzilla films and becomes more dominant in the later films, which tended to get worse in quality and less loved, as I will get to later. In addition, let's not forget that there were plenty of Western, primarily American monster films, most famously Them, which featured gigantic versions of real animals, usually as a result to exposure to nuclear radiation. The most famous American monster is, of course, King Kong, but even he was only portrayed as just being a really large ape and not enlarged due to some unnatural means. My son has often asked me why King Kong is so small in comparison to the Japanese Daikaiju. It's hard for me to explain it to him because he doesn't have the experience to understand that in Western culture, we just don't want our monsters too large. Or at least I think Hollywood always held back, thinking they couldn't put on a convincing enough depiction. Instead, the Japanese just said, screw it. We want giant monsters destroying cities, and we'll figure out a way to do it. It was only until, like you mentioned, Guillermo del Toro's Pacific Rim that you got a Western film that most closely captured the spirit of the Daikaiju films. It also did have some of that whimsy, camp, and occasional silliness mixed in, where you started to wonder to yourself if the film was meant to be serious or not. I agree with you there, but let me just interject. I thought Pacific Rim did a really, really good job of never going too far. I mean, it was a kaiju movie. It absolutely was. And it had science fiction elements, it had aliens, it had dimensional doorways, it had giant fighting robots that were it was everything that I wanted. And I'll tell you something. I think the reason that Pacific Rim is not as beloved as it should be, at least in my estimation, is that it still was a little too far. Even the idea of having 300-foot tall robots is whimsical. I mean, I got my 18-inch NECA Gypsy Danger right over there, and I love him, and I have Knifehead too, and I love that film with all of my heart. I saw that with my friend Derek Hughes, and we went to a special screening about 4 months before it opened, and there were executives from Legendary there, like Thomas Tull when he was still with Legendary, and I don't think I have had as much fun. The two movie-going experiences that I remember, like the last 5 years or something, was seeing Pacific Rim at that early screening, because I really wanted to see it, but we were beside ourselves. It was so much fun. That and Godzilla King of the Monsters, Mike Dougherty's Godzilla King of the Monsters, because he laid in to all of that, and that's what I felt. I think that the reason both King of the Monsters and Pacific Rim are not as beloved in the fan community here as I thought that they would be was because they sort of skewed much closer to their source material, which was the Japanese films. If I were you, I probably would have first shown her the original 1954 Gojira, the Japanese version, of course, the Japanese version of King Kong vs. Godzilla, probably Godzilla vs. Mothra, and then Astro Monster. I guess you could swap Mothra for Ghidorah, but since you're going to see him in Astro Monster, you want to show her Mothra also. And your Rodan or Radon also, pronounced Radon, not Radon. Then skip to Destroy All Monsters because Honda-san didn't direct the ones in between. Ibira, Horror of the Deep, pronounced Ibira, Horror of the Deep, was meant for the Toho King Kong initially, hence you have Godzilla not being very Godzilla-like. After Dam, the series really started to go downhill with increased usage of stock footage and both the appearance of the Godzilla suit in design and quality really deteriorating, looking like a shabby version of the Cookie Monster with the big eyes and the increasingly hunched-over, shambling movements. Godzilla vs. Gigan was Nakajima-san's last performance as Godzilla, and it showed in the later films, although even by then it appeared that he was either fatiguing more quickly or the suit quality forced him to adopt an increasingly worse posture. Either way, you did have to show her a later show of film that it should be Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, just to round out the Big G Rogues Gallery. In terms of standout moments, I'm more interested in the scenes or shots where I feel like the effects work, the miniatures, and model work still hold up. There are a few times in different films where the composition of Godzilla in the suit, along with the model setting, whether it be a city or a factory or a power plant, and perhaps miniature vehicles in the foreground, just really go well together. Also, the space scenes in Godzilla Godzilla versus... Also, the space scenes in Godzilla vs. Monster Zero or Invasion of the Astro Monster are quite good. I think so too, and rival anything that Hollywood was putting out at the same time. Totally agree. Sometimes there would be a cool use of handheld cameras in between a fight with Godzilla and another monster, and that shows the advantage of using the suits in that you can get into the middle of it. Also, the attack of the jet fighters on Godzilla and Ibira was actually quite... Ibira. I didn't realize it was Ibira. Ibira was actually quite nice looking. Finally, as is usually the case, I'd like to provide a little mini review summary of where the franchise currently stands. We know there are currently no firm plans for a Shin Godzilla follow-up, but Toho has indicated that once Godzilla vs. King Kong is out and done, they want to make more, but not a direct sequel follow-up to Shin. They don't want to put out competing films as they now have a big financial investment with Legendary. In terms of the last Legendary film, Godzilla King of the Monsters, it was a decidedly mixed bag. For us Godzilla and Daikaiju film fans, it gave us everything we wanted, and I still concur with your initial review on it, Rob. However, it must be said that the lukewarm box office performance did reveal a few things. It showed that the Daikaiju Godzilla genre is still a relatively niche one, and while we all hoped that Godzilla King of the Monsters would draw in more casual fans, it did not do that, or at least not enough. It's really not the fault of director, Mike Dougherty, who did a great job, and the other filmmakers. Dougherty had a tough task, and it wasn't helped by the film really coming out 2 years too late. They missed out on valuable momentum that was generated from 2014. I had heard that the delay was because they were initially waiting for Gareth Edwards to return. In hindsight, I don't think the delay was worth it to wait for him. Also, the film was delayed from a March 2019 release to May, but that's pretty negligible. Did the marketing start too early and perhaps show too much? Maybe. They could have done with one less trailer and maybe waited a few more months. So we have the upcoming Godzilla vs. King Kong that hopefully will keep its release date in November. While we were still eagerly awaiting a trailer that seems like it will never arrive, at least the studio did make an unintended genius move in delaying the film from its initial March release date, in that otherwise it would have been coming out during the start of the coronavirus lockdown. I think the film is the MonsterVerse's last shot at staying on as a franchise. Toho owns the property, and they have much invested in the success of Godzilla vs. King Kong. It's really up to them whether they continue the deal with Legendary. Well, that's all I have to say on that. Everyone keep on Robserving and Elizaviewing. Well, Jeffrey, what a great letter. Sorry, I had a problem reading it. But I think it's a great letter. And again, you know, I just maintain that I really do think that all Asian science fiction has a bit of... You have to surmount certain expectations. Like, for instance, I really liked Alita Battle Angel. Did I think it was perfect? I didn't. But I thought they did a really great job with it. Unfortunately, so many elements of Asian science fiction have been, well, let's say, co-opted into various ideas in American science fiction. So when you go back and you do a movie like Alita, as well done as I thought it was, I mean, I love the way it looked. I thought, look, the storyline was very familiar. And there wasn't a sense of discovery as much as there should have been to the storyline. But I think as an adaptation of the original source material, I thought it was really good. Ghost in the Shell, I thought was less good, but it just seemed so warmed over. And I like Scarlett Johansson. I understand the controversy. I mean, I get it. But I just like to see that Asian science fiction is penetrating into the U.S. market. I mean, they've talked about making a Star Blazers movie or a Space Battleship Yamato movie for so long. I just don't think it would work. I mean, they would try and change it in, well, we're going to make it the USS Arizona instead of the Yamato or the Yamato. I get that. I get that impulse. I just don't know if Americans would buy into that sort of thing. I think that kind of whimsy is something that you have as a child before you become a little too jaded. And there is an element there is a strange element that I've noticed in fandom where your genre material, your science fiction, fantasy, and horror, it either has to be really funny and goofy, like, say, a Sharknado movie, or it has to have a cool factor to it. There's got to be a coolness to it. And one of the things about Pacific Rim, I thought it was cool, but I think when you see Gypsy Danger dragging an oil tanker, a boat, you know, to use as a baseball bat, down a Hong Kong city street, you have to have a certain outlook on life to scream as I did in the theater. I was like, no way! Like, I felt I was at a wrestling. I was having so much fun. We were having so much fun with that. I loved it so much, and I think that there's a lot of people that it might have that would push it a little too far, and I think that there is certainly a problem, and when they bring over Asian sci-fi, the first thing they start to do is bleed that out. They bleed out, I guess, the Asianness of it, and I always find that to be a mistake. Or if there's a way to westernize it a bit more, but not lose it entirely. And I thought Pacific Rim. I mean, I would have watched Pacific Rim for another hour. Like, I thought the Chinese triplets got short shrift. We needed to see them before they were defeated. We needed to see them pull off one monster, literally monster battle where they emerged victorious. But then again, maybe they did do that and they didn't include it. And I'll tell you something. The sequel, Pacific Rim Uprising, I really didn't like it. And I don't know why. I mean, one day I'm going to have to sit down and watch both of those movies and figure out why did I like one and not the other. What was it? Was it because Pacific Rim understood more, like Guillermo del Toro was the only person able to imbue the movie with what I needed from it? I don't know. Interesting. That is an interesting thought. I don't know. This one comes from our own Ian Samuels. Rob and fellow Robservationists. A brief missive on Starfleet battles versus the Borg. Some of the ships involved and what went wrong, and when it did indeed go wrong, and what they eventually got right when they learned from their mistakes. At the Battle of Wolf 359, a fleet led by Admiral Hansen was set to face the Borg. Admiral Hansen's flagship was an unknown Galaxy-class ship. There was an Ambassador class made famous by the Enterprise C, but the USS Yamaguchi fought at Wolf 359. Challenger class USS Challenger and the Cheyenne class Awani. There were even 2 Constitution refits, despite being a design that was 100 years old, made famous, of course, by James T. Kirk. More older vessels included the Excelsior class USS Melbourne and a variant of the Miranda class USS Saratoga, and even an Oberth class, the USS Bonestell, despite originally being designed as a science vessel. The New Orleans class USS Kyushu, the Niagara class USS Princeton, and the Springfield class USS Chekhov. There were also 2 Nebula class ships, the USS Bellerophon and the Endeavour. Of the 40 ships that joined the battle, only the Nebula class Endeavour survived. Hansen took the ships in as skirmish waves, making it easy for the Borg to pick off the ships. Having learnt from their mistakes, when the Battle of Sector 001, the relatively new Sovereign-class Enterprise E, led the fleet in a swarm rather than a skirmish, overwhelming the Borg cube, inflicting mass amounts of damage, but this was only after Starfleet attempted and failed to stop the Borg in the Typhon sector. The Enterprise E was left out of this battle as Starfleet admirals were unsure how Picard would deal with battling the Borg after his Locutus experience. But they joined the battle at Sector 001 with the Enterprise E with 3 of the new Akira-class ships, including the USS Thunderchild, the same name as the warship in H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. Of course, there was the Defiant under the command of Commander Worf, Federation ambassador to the Klingon Empire, 2 unknown Old Miranda-class with 3 of the small Oberth-class, 3 Norway-class, including the USS Budapest, 5 Sabre-class, including the USS Jaeger, and 6 of the Steamrunner-class, including the USS Appalachia. 2 Nebula-class, including the Endeavour, survivor of Wolf 359. Vice Admiral Hayes led the fleet on board the Galaxy-class USS Madison, but the ship had been destroyed before the Enterprise E arrived. Another ship that was involved in the battle was a YT-1300. It is alleged to have been called the Millennium Falcon. An interesting addition to this is that in an early draft of the First Contact screenplay, to make things a bit different, instead of a Borg cube, the ship was going to instead be a Borg obelisk covered in symbols similar to Egyptian, suggesting that the Borg may have visited Earth earlier and had a connection with the Egyptian pharaohs, but since First Contact would premiere some 2 years after Stargate, it was decided to scrap the idea. Hopefully some fun facts. Ian. Well, Ian, those are fun facts. I didn't know all of those ships participated in the battle, but I thank you for that. And yeah, let's see. I got more letters. This one comes from Rule the Obscure. Happy birthday, Rob. I've been introduced to many inspiring things on Robservations by both you and the many great Post-Geek Singularity letter writers. So to mark the occasion, I would like to share something I discovered earlier this year, which could be of interest to those in lockdown. After watching Predestination a few months back, oh my God, how much do I love that movie? based on the Robert Heinlein story, All You Zombies. A few months back, I went searching for Robert Heinlein's classic time travel short story, By His Bootstraps, and in doing so, discovered a wondrous resource called the Pulp Magazine Archive. Ooh, that sounds right up my alley. Hang on, let me copy this link, and I'm going to put it in the live chat. This is the Pulp Magazine Archive, which could only be awesome. Okay, let me put this in the live chat. There you go. There are countless pulp magazines from the history of science fiction that have been lovingly scanned and available to read for free. Once I discovered the archive, quite easily I was able to locate the October 1941 issue of Astounding Science Fiction, where By His Bootstraps was first published. This was released a few months after Citizen Kane, the same month as the Maltese Falcon, and a few months before America entered World War II. While it may be a bit predictable now, as the tropes it established have been ingrained in most time travel stories since, I defy even the hardened cynic to not be impressed with how clever it was for the time. Reading it in a few hours one night was a truly surreal and meta experience, to be transported back 80 years into the noir-soaked world of a distant era, imagining Heinlein writing it, people reading it in 1941 for the first time on paper about the size of the futuristic electronic device I was reading it on in 2020, all while absorbing a mind-bending time travel story. By the way, do you remember when you read the article complaining about the state of sci-fi fandom in 1939? After that episode, I thought to check the archive, and lo and behold, the original magazine was there too. Oh my God. See, this is why I love you people. This is why I love the Post-Geek Singularity. Here's that link to that original article. So for all of you toxic fans out there, all the way back into 1939. As is the following issue when the writer rebuffed his own letter under a different name. Oh my God, this is what I've been wanting to read. Oh, I might have to do a story on this. Wow, dude, you, my friend, you are making my Sunday afternoon. Oh wait, hang on, it didn't copy. Allow me to copy this and put it into the live chat. Wow, this is fantastic. Man, these are the kind of follow-up letters I love getting. So there you go. Ooh, I can't wait to read that. There's a treasure trove of sci-fi riches to be discovered in these historic magazines, and one of the things that struck me is the interaction between the editor and readers can be just as interesting as the stories or vintage ads themselves. It seems to nicely echo the interaction on Robservations between you and the Post-Geek Singularity. I found an early example, or perhaps even origin, of the grandfather paradox in a discussion between the editor and readers in a magazine from the 1920s. And a reader-submitted story about multiverses from the 1930s. Could this have inspired Hugh Everett to propose the idea in the scientific community in the 1950s, which subsequently inspired Avengers Endgame and devs in current times? Even though you lament the current lack of entertainment news, this last week has been a cracker. Where else could you go from Gladiator to Nowhere Man to the 1940s World Fair to the end of Twilight Time to Stubble McShave's musings on villains to John Willis's thesis on transporter technology to Omar 94's great movie recommendations to Willow Yang's moving letter about Mother's Day in just a few episodes? I'm convinced all of this banter back and forth is inspiring the science fiction and science thinkers of tomorrow, just as those magazines did in their day. Imagination connoisseurs throughout the ages. I suppose what I'm really getting at is that you've stated that you created this channel to expand people's minds to new things by sharing the things that you love, and you often express great respect for filmmakers who achieve what they set out to do. I believe you have clearly achieved what you set out to do with the Burnettwork in both entertaining and stimulating. Certainly, you've done your part to make isolation not just bearable, but enjoyable. I hope you can take satisfaction in that on your birthday. Have a great one. Rule the obscure. You know what? I'm getting choked up. I did not write this article. I did not write this letter. It's hearing things like this that I was telling Elizabeth before I went on the show today. I was like, it was really hitting me. I am getting older. And I'm doing the schmodown and doing all these crazy things, and I'm clearly, like, if not the oldest, One of the oldest, certainly. And, you know, you wonder, are people looking, are they laughing at you? Like, I've never cared about that, really. I don't, but I know for a fact that there are younger fans that kind of do. You know, like, I joke about being the old man standing on my lawn, you know, screaming at the younger kids going, get off my lawn. I've been lucky so far to have all kinds of fans. I mean, I look at the gamut of people that watch this show, and I feel very fortunate that I have exactly like you point out. I mean, I started this channel just to celebrate and talk about all the stuff that I like. Because, you know, it's not, like I told people, I started out as a fan. I was alone. I had a couple of friends that shared my passion for movies, but the far-reaching geekiness of everything I liked, whether it was flying model rockets or Japanese die-cast super robots from the 70s, or Star Trek, or Star Wars, or action figures, or whatever, the wide variety of all my geek interests, I didn't have anybody that shared all of them. And it's like, you know, when you start talking about Poppy toys from the 70s and how much I like them, and how I like them now still, you know, the Solar Chogokin line, or give me die-cast metal build Gundam toys or whatever. There's not a lot of people I know that are into that kind of stuff, but to have this channel, and like you pointed out, I mean, I never really thought about that, but reading that sentence about all the things we covered in the last week, I guess that is interesting. And as long as I get a letter, I mean, they used to say that letters of comment represent 10 people or 100 people that feel the same way. They're just not writing in. To hear you say that and sort of quantify it for me in black and white, I can't thank you enough. It's great to hear that you feel that way, and I'll continue to do that. I mean, and I, you know, like what you just did, you went into it. I didn't know this archive existed, this Pulp archive. I can imagine this is a rabbit hole that I would go down, but, you know, I wanted to find, I couldn't find the follow-up article that I read, and here you just brought it to me. So Rule the Obscure, once again, thank you very much for the letter. And I mean, how I feel so fortunate to have the Post-Geek Singularity, to have all you people out there, whether it's somebody like Trinidad the Island Man who sends me a box full of wonder, or you, Rule, who send me letters like this that teach me something as well, or Jeffrey Mao's analysis of kaiju films, and also, you know, Ian Samuel's talking about which starships were actually at the Battle of Wolf 359 or the Battle of Sector 01001. Amazing. It's amazing. So thank you for that. And to think I wasn't going to go on today. Amazing. Dean Mikatich, speaking of people that write in a lot. Hi, Rob and the Post-Geek Singularity. First of all, happy birthday. Hope it's been a good one. I've been watching last night's episode, and you mentioned that when in your mind, in wandering off, you might be thinking about how the propulsion system of an Eagle transport works. And when you tell people what's on your mind, people look at you like you're mad. Don't worry. You're not the only one that does this. I do it myself, especially when I'm building a 3D model or thinking about tackling a challenging shape to model. Take the runabout from Deep Space Nine that I'm building and recently posted the work in progress on the Facebook page. I sit there looking at the top where the warp core is meant to be and think, is there enough room for the matter and antimatter fuel tanks to fit in that space? I have to say, nope. Not for a ship that's meant to stay away from home base for weeks to months until it needs to be refueled. However, looking at those big fat pylons, with the exception of the piping from the warp core to the nacelles and the impulse engine, there's not much in there and plenty of room for the tank to fit in. So I can see the tank sitting in the pylons and connecting up to the warp core on top and then coming back down to the nacelles, which solves that problem. Then you've got the Antigrav Sled seen in TNG and Deep Space Nine. How do they work? Well, they got gravity plating, which had a great exploration on how they worked in the TNG technical manual. So why not just use the same technology in the sleds, but in reverse? Or what about the hoverboard in Back to the Future Part 2? How does that work? For me, we know the Earth core is made of iron. Someone had to come up with some technologically based magnet that uses a reverse polarity to push the board away from the Earth. The idea also works with hoverboards not working on water unless you have power. With the board hovering over the water, you can't get the friction needed to push yourself along as you're just moving the water with your foot. But that's where the small rockets come in, on Biff board, just like an electric bike. It's a shame that the writers behind the current Trek do not think about these things. Take the device that Tilly uses in Discovery Season 2, Episode 1. She activates some sort of anti-grav tracker beam unit that starts out the size of an ice cooler box. When she activates it, she has to run for her dear life so that it does not kill her as it opens. It then opens up to something about the size of a pitcher mound, and it comes up to about knee height. From the sound of it opening, it sounded like pure metal. When I saw that, I was thinking, well, where the hell did that come from? There's no way that could have been fitting into that ice cooler box it was originally in, especially when you think about all the technology inside to make it work. It just seems like something that had been pulled right out of one of the Iron Man suits. Then you take into account all the Trek shows that are set after Discovery. We've not seen anything like it before, with the exception of Admiral Janeway giving Captain Janeway the armor for Voyager and Endgame. That technology that was 50 years down the road from what we'd seen at that point in Trek, so it was easier to swallow. I also have the same issue with the gantries when Discovery and the Enterprise dock together, so the crew can get off the Discovery. Sorry, I did not mean to go into a minor rant about current Trek. Rob, you keep on thinking about how things work on our shows and films. Doing this is what keeps our imaginations alive. Peace and long life, Dean Mikitich. Well, Dean, one of the things I really hate about modern Star Trek is they don't bother to think about any of this at all. And part of my Star Trek fandom was derived out of all of the ancillary material, even though the Franz Joseph technical manual wound up not being canonical, nor were the Enterprise blueprints. There were people thinking about this stuff. And when Star Trek The Motion Picture came around, when you had people like Mike Miner and Andy Probert working on the refit Enterprise, it was all mapped out. Like, they thought about how all of this stuff would work. And now what's happened is, you have people like John Eaves, who are talented Star Trek designers that go way back, who've been working on these modern iterations of Star Trek, but all they care about is how something looks. And there's not a lot of thought about Star Trek lineage. It's like everything is done unto itself. One of the things that I thought was really cool when Brian Fuller originally decided to use the Ken Adam, Ralph McQuarrie design of the Enterprise for Star Trek Planet of the Titans, which is where the Discovery came from, I'm like, you could really make that look like it belonged in that era. Like it was a design that they might only have built a couple of, and then they abandoned that design for whatever reason, and I would have bought off on it. But then they changed the nacelles, they did everything, because I thought that what I loved about the low-slung warp nacelles, it kind of harked back to the Enterprise D design, and it was like the Enterprise D designers would have gone back. They really could have, they could have done a lot. And the problem is, your art department, when you think about the art department and the designers that worked in the Berman era of Trek, whether it was the Akutas or whether it was Rick Sternbach or whether it was, of course, later Doug Drexler, these were all fanatics who were not just fans and professionals, but they were really taking the time and the thought, they were putting in the thought to make sure it all kind of worked, that there was a lineage there. And the idea that there isn't now, I mean, they've just abandoned all of it to say that what we're doing is, it's still canonical, but we're just updating it all. Because, oh no, this weird idea that those designs somehow won't work. Those designs, of course they'll work. You could absolutely have the exact same bridge that was used in the original series. What you do is you just update the details. You don't have to have the same kind of buttons. I wouldn't say make it necessarily touchpads, but you could make it redolent and it would kind of look the same, and we understand it's a visual reboot and you're going to shoot it differently. Things will look different, but those designs were relatively timeless. And this idea that all of modern Star Trek, they're using these hologram tropes that I've read a lot about. They're like a trope of modern science fiction now that in 50 years they're going to look incredibly dated. But it really bothers me. That's what really bothers me about modern Trek, is there's no thought or feeling at all about that stuff. And I like that you wrote in about that. John D says, okay, Rob, I've been wondering for a while now, since both of you love all things Trek and just so happen to be the only main people to refer to our favorite hallway character from Picard as Space Legolas, whether or not you and Doomcock are one and the same. But now you both share a birthday on the very same day. Both love Trek above all else. Both talk about Space Legolas. Both absolutely despise Discovery and Picard. and now find out that you two share the same birthday? I now see why Doomcock must alter his voice. Come on, Rob, I'm outing you. Be honest. Are you also Doomcock? And I love your show. Well, John D., I am not Doomcock. I am not Doomcock, but I really do appreciate what he does. I like that he's created a character, a persona, and he's even got a sidekick, Cthulhu sidekick. I think that's great. No, and you know, no, I'm not. I am not Doomcock. And by the way, people have wondered, I would love to do a live stream with Doomcock. I think, you know, it's interesting. It really depends who you're talking to tailor the kind of conversation you have. I think that if Doomcock and I were to get together, we would have a pretty, I don't know, very, I think, highbrow, erudite conversation about Star Trek. It'd be interesting. People have said he's reached out to me. I mean, I'm easy to find on Twitter. I have no problem. I would love to do a show with Doomcock. I enjoy his work very, very much. But I am not him. I assure you, I am not Doomcock. Omar94 is here. He says, "Hi, Rob. When I read about movie productions, one thing I notice is that some movies that didn't turn out well could have actually been good, as there are people who clearly knew what they were doing, but then others got involved and started making the wrong decisions. What I mean by people who clearly know what they are doing is I'm talking about the writers, as movies can start off with great scripts but become something different on screen. Sam Hamm has gone on record saying that a lot of people, the problems they had with the 1989 Batman movie, like Joker killing Bruce Wayne's parents and Alfred letting Vicky Vale in the Batcave, were not him, as his original script had major differences from the movie. Shane Black has stated his original Lethal Weapon script was far better than the final film, since he did so many rewrites on set, and Bruce Willis and Joel Silver kept demanding changes. That's true. His original Long Kiss Goodnight script was darker, more graphic, with alternate action scenes and bigger backstories for the two leads, unlike what we got on screen. Charles Edward Pogue said his original Kull the Conqueror script was altered by the studio interference, as his script was much more serious than the film. His original Dragonheart script was darker and more serious than the movie, with Pogue using his original script for the Dragonheart novelization instead of the final film. Pogue even stated Dragonheart was his favorite thing he ever wrote. So why aren't writers allowed to have more input on movies compared to directors and producers? I'm not saying writers should be completely in charge, but at least have more influence for how a movie turns out. For example, Shane Black's two scripts I mentioned above sold for record numbers. The Last Boy Scout and The Long Kiss Goodnight were huge spec sales, which shows, I believe Long Kiss sold for $4 million and Last Boy Scouts sold for 1.75, which shows that Black had something very special with those scripts and should at least have had influence on the movies. Why would he need to rewrite scenes if Bruce Willis wanted changes? Bruce Willis is just an actor, so why would he get more influence on how the movie turned out compared to Shane Black, whose scripts studios paid very good money for in order to make? Thanks, and live long and prosper." Well, Omar, that, my friend, is how the movie business works. First of all, you know, everybody's got a different sensibility about how things work, and people think. I'll give you an example. Say you're going to direct a scene, and the scene is two characters meeting in a restaurant, and the scene description might say it's an Italian restaurant, maybe it's old, like the scene description might say it's an Italian restaurant, old world New York charm, or something like that. I don't know. And that's all it says. So let's say you're Michael Mann, you know, and it's I mean, he writes his own stuff, but you're making a movie in the late or mid 80s, Miami Vice era Michael Mann, and you want to have characters meet at an Italian restaurant, but you're making a movie like Manhunter, where you're giving it this 80s neon sheen, and you as the director get to decide. So suddenly you're like, you know what? I know they're supposed to meet in an old school Italian restaurant, like a Goomba restaurant, but I don't want to do that. And suddenly, you know, the director, who's the arbiter of really, it's the vision of the movie is filtered through him, suddenly makes those kinds of changes. And a director is making literally 1 million decisions a day. There's so many what characters are wearing. I mean, think about what a character, what a human being puts on their clothes, when they put on their clothes, what kind of clothes they wear. All right? You have a costume designer that is designing the costumes, the wardrobe for a film. Then you have a director, and they have to have discussions like, what kind of clothes does the main character wear? Like if you're a lawyer, say the character is a lawyer. Is he a lawyer that buys his suits off the rack? Does he go to Brooks Brothers and have his suits tailored, or does he like bespoke suits? I mean, if you think about it, if you look at Hannibal, Brian Fuller's Hannibal, one of the great things about the character and the way the film, the series rolled out was Hannibal's suits became a thing. His three-piece, very bespoke suits with even the knots, the Windsor knots he would tie, all become part of the character, and that's something that it plays into the verisimilitude of what's happening. Now, all of that stuff might not have even been on the page. This was something that came out of the showrunner's minds. I mean, Brian Fuller might have had this in his mind, and then he tells the character. Now, what happens if Mads Mikkelsen had said, on TV, the showrunner, the writer-producer has control, but if Mads Mikkelsen was if he'd made Die Hard and he was one of the number one stars in the United States, and he were to come on the project, say Bruce Willis was going to play Hannibal. What if Bruce Willis said, I hate three-piece suits, I'm not going to wear suits that have a Windsor knot. Not going to do it. And because you paid $20 million for Bruce Willis, suddenly what he wants to wear, what makes him comfortable, becomes it's way more important than the actual vision of the film. Bruce Willis is thinking about his own comfort. Now, by the way, Bruce Willis was never offered Hannibal. I'm using this as a hypothetical example, since you brought it up. So suddenly, whether or not it's good for the story, whether it adds to the whole sort of what's in the proscenium of the frame. I say proscenium of the frame. Proscenium is obviously a theater term, but I like to use it to think about it as what's on the frame. So everything that appears inside the frame of every shot of a movie can change the feel of what it is that you're watching. So it doesn't matter whatever room you're in, what color's the room, what clothes people have on, what kind of clothes are they, the lighting. All these decisions are made, and they all have to work together. And on a feature film, the director has the vision, but if the director isn't as powerful as the star, you have to wait and make the star happy first. And the star is not thinking about how this movie's going to turn out. The star, believe it or not, for the most part, is thinking about, well, what's going on today? Whereas the director, who's developed this project before you even get to set and could be on the movie for a year or 2 or 3, depending on how long is this movie in post-production for. The director has to see it through all the way to the end. Actors, they show up on set, they do their thing, and they leave, hoping it's going to turn out all right. But there's all these decisions, and sometimes when a script is written, the director's vision, the script really literally becomes more of a blueprint than anything else. You're following the script, but a lot of what the writer might have envisioned gets jettisoned for the sake of the director's vision. Tim Burton has a very quirky vision of things. He has the soul of an animator, and a lot of his movies are not necessarily, he'd made Edward Scissorhands, and he'd made Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and I don't know if he made Edward Scissorhands after Batman, but certainly he'd made Beetlejuice. Maybe he'd made Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Beetlejuice, and then took on Batman. But he had Tim Burton has he's very Burton-esque. There's no other director like him, and his Batman was clearly not set in the real world. It was set in an Anton Furst designed Gotham that takes place in an alternate universe somewhere. And once you have and I didn't read Sam Hamm's, I read his draft for Batman Returns, which I thought was one of the most amazing fantasy scripts I'd ever read, and it was also hugely changed during production. Robin was a big part of that script, by the way. So when you have a director with such vision as Tim Burton, who is no longer constrained by reality, and you're now in Burton land, a lot of what Sam Hamm was trying to write it falls by the wayside. Because what happens is then the director's vision sort of trumps the writer. And what you really hope is that if you don't have a writer-director, you want a writer and a director who are simpatico in their vision. And I think sometimes you get that. I mean, obviously, Frank Darabont wrote and directed Shawshank Redemption, but he really, I thought, captured the soul of Stephen King's story. Or I thought that David Fincher, while when I first saw, I love the movie Seven, but I love that script so much, I saw Seven as having a little bit more pulp elements in it than what we eventually got on the screen. I thought the movie was, I mean, I've come to absolutely love Seven. When I first saw it, I remember thinking I wanted it to be more pulpy than it was, but I really loved it. But there's a I think if Seven was done in a more histrionic, over the top way, it wouldn't have been as good as it turned out to be. So you're dealing with really overall visions of what people want, and I think it's really important. And I think the big problem with Star Trek is there is no vision. You know, you're watching. To me, one of the frustrating parts about watching modern Star Trek is it's all over the place. I don't feel that the designs don't work with the costumes, don't work with the portrayals of the characters. Like, Zachary Quinto is a fine actor, but the way he was directed and written to play Spock, I thought was a fundamental misunderstanding of what a Vulcan is, and specifically what the character of Spock was. And that did not change on Discovery for me. And I feel that one of the problems sometimes is we get all these departments are doing their own thing because the visionary director is not in charge of all of it. I mean, to me, it's like, I'll give you another example. I think J.J. Abrams is particularly egregious when it comes to this. The idea, like in Rise of Skywalker, they fly now? How is that even an exchange in the movie? Like, have you not watched Clone Wars? Have you not seen Boba Fett and Return of the Jedi? It should not be anything like we have in The Mandalorian. They know that it's almost like I mean, they knew it was The Mandalorian came out before Rise of Skywalker, but I feel like when I watch J.J. Abrams movies, I'm not seeing an overall vision. I'm seeing all these different departments are throwing their stuff into the movies, and they don't gel. They don't work together in tandem to create peak verisimilitude. But yeah, I don't disagree with you. David Miller is here. David Miller says, "Greetings, Rob. Happy first day." I'd like to say that I've always been gratified that you share my love of musicals. For the longest time, my favorite movie was West Side Story until a little gem called All That Jazz came along, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. That said, I don't think I've ever heard you comment on the musical Rent. 5,000 hours. Dun, dun, dun. I won't sing that song. I would understand if you don't think it's as timeless as West Side Story or Wizard of Oz, and the less said about La La Land, the better. Oh, come on now. I like La La Land. You may think the film is very much a product of the last half of the 90s, but there's a lot I like about it. So if there are any opinions you'd like to voice about the film, that'd be great. It was directed by Christopher Columbus, who went on to direct the Harry Potter movie. Good day to you, sir, and I hope Elizabeth's birthday spankings were not too painful. No, they weren't. They were not too painful. You know, I've seen Rent. I've seen the stage production, which I liked very much. For some reason, the movie just didn't click with me. Kind of like the movie, I had seen a chorus line on stage, and I didn't dig the movie as much as I wanted to. I think it's hard to. Maybe it's because it wasn't as dynamic. I saw the movie once, but I didn't love it, and I can't tell you exactly why. I would really have to go revisit it again, and maybe I will do that. But to me, West Side Story is very dynamic, and there is a sort of a whimsical element, the dance fighting, and it takes place in kind of like this idealized New York, even though it's filmed on the streets, but it's also very stage bound, and the way it looks, and there's a fantasy element to the West Side Story musical that was co-directed by Robert Wise and Jerome Robbins that I really love. And Rent, I don't know, it just didn't click with me. Whereas All That Jazz, the way it effortlessly moved between the real world and fantasy sequences and musicals and stylization, and then you're on the streets of New York, I thought that was a really hard task to be able to do that, and I thought it was phenomenally well done. So Yes, yes, it was. Let's jump over and see what you guys are saying in the chat. Let's see who's here. Emilio Hansen is here. How much United States dollars does Musk need to buy Mars? I don't know. I don't think you can, Buck. I mean, you have to have who would you buy Mars from? No, I think yeah. I mean, I know what you're saying. It's kind of got a tongue planted firmly in cheek in it, but I don't think that even Elon Musk would have enough money to pay for Mars, unless all the governments of the world were broke, and he was able to pay them. I'll tell you one thing though. What's maritime law? Have we figured that out yet? I mean, can he go to Mars and plant his flag and own it? I think whoever gets to Mars first and sets up their presence is really going to be the person who owns Mars. Willow is here. Willow sends in a tip and says, Canada isn't as utopian as Americans might think. Alberta is quite conservative. There's a movement called Wexit currently happening. Wow. The First Nations face a number of problems, and while healthcare is affordable, the wait times can be very long. Yeah, I've heard that. No, I don't think that look, I think, I think that while I don't think any country is perfect, I think that Americans we need to get back to being a little bit more pragmatic about what's going on in our lives. And there's got to be, I see that our common sense has sort of taken leave of our senses. I mean, I understand that look, people want to get back to work and all that, but there are certain beliefs that we have, that Americans espouse, that I think we need. Like, I find a strange disconnect. I grew up in a world where Americans were at the forefront of science. We landed on the moon. Maybe it's because we haven't landed on the moon since 1972. But we carry around supercomputers in our pockets that are, talk about the age of wonder, and yet we will use them to spout all kinds of nonsensical BS that makes no sense, considering as you're typing this nonsense on a supercomputer that is the result of unbelievable ingenuity. I find it strange. But I also think that the one place, Canada, it seems, to my mind at least, that Canada is a bit more level-headed about where we're at. And I find the acrimony that Americans have toward one another these days to be distressing. I mean, we're all Americans. I find it strange that these deep divisions that we've always wanted to pretend that we've gotten over, that we never really did. And the thin veneer of American civilization can be stripped away very easily. And I find that very disconcerting. So I don't think Canada is necessarily as utopian, but it seems a bit more level-headed. Nick Parrish says, what's up today, Rob? I apologize that I'm late on writing this, but I want to wish a happy belated birthday to one of the late great overseers of the sweaty universe, Sensei John Schnepp. John Schnepp's birthday would have been yesterday, and I miss the big guy every day. It was so much fun. It didn't matter how my week was going. Whenever I could be on Collider Heroes with John and Amy and Coy or Jay Washington or Jason Inman or Ashley Robinson or Comic Book Girl 19. I mean, it was always a fun time, and I miss the guy. He's been gone almost 2 years now, and it just seems so strange. But yeah, thanks for writing that in. I appreciate that. Dan V writes in and says, speaking of Godzilla, every fan needs to read Godzilla Half-Century War, which is a great comic by James Stokoe. It takes place over 50 years from 1954 on, with a man trying to take down Godzilla like Moby Dick, and has amazing art. Ooh, I'll get that. I don't have that. I'd love to get that. That sounds good to me. Julius Goodwin, who you've been very supportive of the channel, Julius, over the last couple of days. That's very nice of you to say. Thank you, Thank you very, very much. Julius says, what prompted you to do this channel on YouTube? I know Mr. Campia's story as it's posted on his Patreon page, but you only really came onto my radar because of his show. Your Wikipedia page doesn't have much. That's so funny. I should update my Wikipedia page. Well, here's the thing. I was I brought into the YouTube space. I'd never really done anything on YouTube until John Schnepp called me up, who I'd known for years in LA, working in independent film, doing projects, and I had met John Schnepp, and I know him for years. And he calls me up one day, and he says he's on a new show called Collider Heroes. Back then it was, pardon me, he called me up and said it was AMC Heroes. And he asked me if I wanted to be a guest. He thought I'd be a good guest because of my filmmaking background and what I'd been doing. And we had just finished up the Star Trek The Next Generation Blu-ray sets that I had been working on for 3 years with Roger Lay Jr. and the Akutas. And why don't you come on and talk about, we're doing a show about comic book movies. And he knew that I was a longtime collector. I would see him at the comic book store every week and stuff. And so I went on, and it was me and John Campea, who I didn't know. I didn't know John Campea from his shows. I didn't watch the movie blog. I didn't know anything about him. And I hadn't watched Collider. I hadn't paid much attention to the YouTube space back then. I mean, I watched YouTube videos when they would pop up, but it wasn't something that I was paying much attention to. So I went on the show. And back then when it was the 6th episode of AMC Heroes. So I was on with John Campea and John Schnepp. And they just kept bringing me back. And then I became a series regular. And John Campea left Collider, then came back, and then he left again. But, we were always friendly. I really liked doing the show with the Johns. And John Campea and John Schnepp and I all had enough differing points of view that that it made it lively and fun. And John Schnepp would always say to me, he goes, you're interested in so many different things, and you're always talking positively about things. You should start your own YouTube channel. And I'm like, I was reluctant to do that. I mean, I was happy to roll in and be on someone else's show, and it got to a point where Collider, we were on every day. John and Amy and I, we were on every day, and it was like a full-time job. And people would recognize me out in the world. They would stop me and go, "Oh my God, you're on YouTube, you're on Collider Heroes," and I'm like, "Oh yeah," So John Schnepp had said, start your own show. And then Elizabeth was like, yeah, you should start your own show. And what people don't understand is doing YouTube shows it's work. I mean, it's like a job, and I'm like, do I want to do that? Because if you're going to go on to YouTube, then you've got to have a website. Otherwise, you want to get people to your channel. I mean, it becomes a thing where you have to have a website. And you have to have an online presence. I already did, but you have to have, and you keep it going. And you're going to build a community. And my whole thing was that, and John Schnepp would say this, he called all of us sweaties. And I always thought, okay, if you're going to be a YouTuber or thing like that, you have to have your catchphrases. Like I used Post-Geek Singularity way before the YouTube show that I was on, but Collider Heroes. I came up with that term a long time ago. So I had that, and then, I was thinking, what could I call, what am I? And if people are going to watch my show, that's where imagination connoisseurs, again, I've called myself that for a long time. And I figure having catchphrases like that, what that does is it helps you solidify a community. So I don't know. I mean, Elizabeth bought me this microphone in the Christmas of 2018. And she's like, start your own YouTube show. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I did it up until I did the first 300 episodes in our laundry room. I was literally right next to the kitchen in the little laundry room between our bedroom wing of the house. And I was just there. And that's where I first started. You could see into the kitchen, and I didn't have a background. And I didn't know, like, I wanted to do, the first Robservations, when I went and saw Greg Smith, took months to finish. There was a lot of editorial, and I thought it was going to be that kind of a show, like a DVD special feature show. And then when I first started talking, I was like, okay, I'll talk about my favorite movies, letters A to Z, which I never even finished. And then people started sending me letters, and it sort of evolved, and I stuck with it. I mean, I stuck with it, and it's been fun. And for the letter I read today about people rising up and starting this community and being a part of this community, and it's been, I have received a lot of very positive affirmation for the show, And it has, for me, like I've said, it's given me a reason. You know, when I'm working on the various projects I'm working in this business, especially in the indie level now, it is monumentally frustrating. There's a reason why not a lot of people that I started with in the entertainment business are still here, because, you know, you want to get out of it. I'm lucky in that next month I have The Hills Run Red coming out on Blu-ray. I'm still trying to get free enterprise. I want to be able to buy back the rights to the movie and put out the definitive 4K version of that. I finished producing and editing Tango Shalom, which we are now actively trying to sell. It is now out there. We have a sales agent. We're trying to sell that. Again, if that were to sell, and it will sell, I'll have a film that I produced, a new film that I produced coming out. I'm now working on another film project. I have the show that has not yet to be named that I'm working on for Netflix in a small way, as I said, a small way. But I've worked on 10 episodes of that show. The first season's already done. I mean, it's not entirely done, but my role is done. So but yet it's incredibly frustrating. The entertainment business is frustrating. You follow every lead. You know, there have been so many people that have called me up and said, hey, I want to be in business with you. They hear about my projects. I've got my projects. I go a long way down the road with people, and then they just one day not call you anymore. And you think you're going somewhere, and then they don't call you. Or somebody says, yep, I want to finance your slate of movies. This has happened a lot in the last 6 years. There are people that come into your orbit. They tell you, oh yeah, and you are the one doing all the work. Here are the scripts. Here are the schedules. Here are the budgets. Here's everything I need. And they'll tell you that they have the money to do it. And then literally one day, they just won't call you back. And it gets to the point where there are times when you're either going to put a bullet in your skull because you're so frustrated, or you do other things. Like a lot of people, you know, you can self-medicate. I did a lot of that. I've cut down on my drinking, but I used to drink a lot more than I do now. I mean, I love to drink. I love alcoholic beverages. I mean, I love my water too. I love the act of drinking. But, I mean, I would drink a lot to sort of get me through the day. So it would be the kind of thing where I didn't. Well, what's interesting is over the course of doing this show, I've sort of dropped off. Don't get me wrong. I still drink. But I drink a lot less because this show is it's a much healthier outlet, but it's kept me interested. You know, meeting people, you guys, all the Post-Geek Singularity have kept me like, oh, I'm going to get back in and I need to concentrate on what's important. So if I'm not making something, I have this show as an outlet. I've got you guys and gals and all members of the Post-Geek Singularity that have kept me sane. And when you're trying to make things, to have this kind of an outlet, I mean, John Schnepp and John Campia brought me in. And by the way, I have to shout out, when John Schnepp passed away, there was a lot of weirdness happening with other people that I don't blame them for what happened. But both John Campia and I were not treated very well, which I certainly didn't deserve. But I understood and I kept my mouth shut. But John Campia called me and asked me, hey man, why not come on my show? And I didn't know how that was going to go, but this August will represent 2 years since I've been doing shows with John Campia. And again, I didn't know what it would be like when he asked me to go on the John Campia show, and it was only because I was on the John Campia show that I decided to do my own show as well. And it's been a lot of fun, and I have it's been, let's just say that this show has been good for me all the way around. There's been no downside to doing this show. So yeah, but that's where I'm coming from. So I hope that answers the question. I mean, it was so weird. I didn't ever expect to be on YouTube. And in April, I celebrated my 5th anniversary. Half a decade? I mean, it's crazy to me that this is the 419th episode of this show. That's insane. I can't believe, you know, and grinding it out and doing it. And the only reason I keep doing it, the only reason is because we have this great community. And it's been, and I'm not going to say that financially it hasn't been good as well. I mean, it has, and the way people support the show is amazing. But it's not just financial. I mean, I have to tell you, sometimes I'll get a letter from somebody, and I'm just like, fuck, man, I'm not going to go on today. I'll be pissed about something. I'll just be like, something that's unrelated to this show, but something happened, something disappointing, something didn't occur that I thought was going to occur, or I'll get sued by a former business partner I'm like, who the fuck are you to do that to me? After all the work I did for you, and then drag my name through the mud, something like that happens, and then you know what? I'll get a letter from somebody. I'll get a letter where somebody says they like the show and they're trying to get through a tough time and they watch this show and the Post-Geek Singularity. And for me, it'll be the time when I needed to hear it. I needed to hear it. That's all I needed to hear was somebody say that. And I'm like, you know what? I'll keep going. So there's been a lot of that. There's been more times than the Post-Geek Singularity will know that they have saved me when they didn't even know I needed saving. So I know this is kind of a long roundabout answer, but there you go. And Julius, thank you for the very generous support of the channel. Mukbang sends in a super chat and says, I like the vest, but I'm curious about its iconography. What do the glyphs mean? Do you know what they mean? I love your work and shows. I don't know. They look like cave drawings. I mean, you got South Pacific Islanders. These look like cave drawings. I guess they celebrate I don't know. That's a good question. Trinidad the Island Man would have to step in and tell me. I don't know. I'm sure he will. JS sends in a super chat and says, oh, hi, Rob. On the Kaiju tip, I have to push the Gamera trilogy. The Midnight is great. I love the Gamera trilogy. The Midnight is very, very good movies. I mean, I have to say, like, Kaiju movies really... Kaiju... since the early... I mean, Godzilla versus Mothra, which actually made me cry. The new Godzilla continuities... I love those things. And they've been getting better and better and better. And the Gamera trilogy is really, really good. I think it does improve. And you're absolutely right, Jay. I think those Gamera movies are great. Senor Ashish says, the signs are pointing in the right direction for a good sci-fi series. The age-old saying of the third time's the charm. The announcement of said series made on your birthday. Anson Mount looks exactly like you, channeling your beard in the announcement video. No, I think Anson Mount's great. And you know what? Anson Mount, well, I can't say. Well, maybe Anson Mount. You'll see. Look, I love Anson Mount. I think he was great. He was the best thing that was on Star Trek Discovery, but he was acting like he was in a Star Trek show. My thing, it's all about the writing. And what I would love is if I've heard that Mark Bernardin is going to be on the staff. I hope so. But Akiva Goldsman, look at his track record for science fiction. Whether it's Batman and Robin, whether it's iRobot, whether it's Lost in Space, has he written anything that is good? He writes the worst kind of pulp sci-fi to me. And I've even met him. He was a good friend of Alan Kaufman, one of the producers of Free Enterprise. But I just think that the people that are controlling modern Star Trek are not the right writers. If they were content to be producers, and what I would love if somebody Ira Steven Baird it. If an Ira Steven Baird were to come in, take over, and they were to say, like, okay, and you've got Kurtzman is the new Rick Berman, and he lets Ira Bear make his Pike show. That's what I would like to see. But you know what? Hope springs eternal. And I want it to be good. Eric White sends in a tip, and Eric White says, hi, Rob. If Hugh Jackman is truly done as Wolverine, what do you think of making him completely CGI? The same thing they do with the Beast now. Wolverine doesn't really look human. Do you agree? I can't agree because I think Wolverine has to be a human being, and one of the things that made Wolverine so good is it is, in fact, Hugh Jackman. And having met him, obviously, I produced the special features for X-Men and X-Men X2. I met him and interviewed him. The guy is so charismatic that I think the success of the character is because of Hugh Jackman. And I would not want to see Wolverine be fully CGI. I can't get behind you with that. I mean, I don't know how they would do it, but if they could, I just think we need a real human being there. I really do. I really think we do. And I just think Hugh Jackman is, they can find somebody like him. We'll have to see. Dan V is here and says, I will say I'm glad you're not Doomcock. I get tired of his fake scoops that have zero semblance of reality, like the 3 cuts with The Rise of Skywalker and the George Lucas ending scoring the best. Then his recent Civil War video and Kathleen Kennedy was on the set of Mandalorian. I haven't seen that stuff. I mean, I did see the stuff about, look, there's always multiple cuts of things when people are making movies. I don't know anything about the Lucas cuts. I don't know if that was true. I don't see the difference. My whole thing is that having worked in the industry and I'm continuing to work in the industry now on various things, I try and bring that knowledge to what I'm talking about. So that's why I can only deal with things that I know. Like, I try not to report on things or do shows about things that aren't true unless it's been reported on either Deadline or in the trades, Variety or Hollywood Reporter. I tend to stay away from, although I like reading it all. I do follow it all. So, yeah. Raygun Media Productions is here. Now, Mr. Raygun, he's got an Instagram. He's noticed. So, underneath Trinidad the Island Man's shirt, or his vest, I am indeed wearing a Mr. Raygun t-shirt, which I love. As a matter of fact, one of Elizabeth's favorite t-shirts is this one that Mr. Raygun, let's see if you can see it. I love this. It looks like a combination of the language in Arrival with the alien language in Arrival with an awesome vintage Flash Gordon-esque blaster. Mr. Raygun and his lovely lady are long supporters of this channel. And if you look up Mr. Raygun, I mean, he sells resin kits of vintage ray guns. He's got great t-shirts. Elizabeth has this. It's a great, if you want to get a great t-shirt, they do this pew pew shirt that I recommend for anybody's girlfriend. They are great. So, yes, glad to see you rocking the Mr. Raygun shirt paired with the wicked tiki vest. Send some birthday artwork to your, Send some birthday artwork to your 1701 email from Jason Spriggs. I have not seen that. I haven't really been. Hang on. Let me see. I will look. Since you asked, I will look right now. Let's say Jason. Oh, hang on. Yes. Let me see. Here it is. I did not see this. I did not see this. Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, my God. This is gold. This is gold. Hang on a second. I don't even know how. Hang on. Hold on. Wait. I need to download this and show this right now on the show. Wow, this is out. How could I have missed this? How could I have missed this? Oh, this is just too good. Okay, I'm going to put this. I got to put this up. You got to see this. You guys got to see this. This is too good. Mr. Raygun, how could I have missed this? Because I don't even know. Look at this. Look at this, ladies and gentlemen. It's Elizabeth and I, relic of the future past, the original motion picture soundtrack. Happy birthday, 2020. Look at this. Man, is this dope. Wow, I'm putting this all on my social media. Wow, I did not see this. How did I miss this? I got to go back looking through my emails, man. This is outstanding. Thank you for that. Wow, Elizabeth's going to love that. Thank you so much for that. It's amazing. Chuck Philpott is here, and he sends in a super chat and says, I got my new Magic the Gathering cards this week. I didn't get them to play. I've, in fact, never held the cards till last week. Have you seen the new series run? This series has Godzilla monsters in them. Rob, thank you for all you do. Chuck Philpott, I did not know that there are Magic the Gathering cards with Godzilla in them. That's amazing. That's amazing. That's crazy. But do you not play the Magic the Gathering, or do you just collect the cards? I don't know. Julius, once again, you're very, very, very generous. I mean, thank you so much for this. A confession. I haven't watched any... Oh, wait, oh my God. Julius Goodwin says, I haven't watched any Star Wars since The Phantom Menace. The prequels killed it for me, but as you're the one who helped break the story, I'm curious. Do you think the Duel of the Fates script would have been better than Rise of Skywalker? Yes. I think the Duel of the Fates script was far, far better than what we got. Look, I think that what happened was Carrie Fisher passed away, and it was derailed. But what I thought was really the most interesting thing about the Rise of Skywalker, well, what for me, first of all, Duel of the Fates would have been a much better title. The whole idea of it was better. I think that what was going on in the script, I'm not saying the script that I covered, that I read, was perfect. But I think the story was much more interesting. And I think it really would have tied up the sequel trilogy. If it had gone out with Duel of the Fates, people would have thought that the Rise of Skywalker, that the whole sequel trilogy was better. It really tied up everything in a nice bow, and it really felt like, what I don't understand was what Colin Trevorrow did with that script. It felt like there was more work between the three of them. Like I did not like Force Awakens very much, but at least I thought that the Duel of the Fates script was a much more interesting script. There are things in it, like Torvallum, the character that Ben Solo goes to see. That sequence happened too quickly, and there were things in it I would have changed, but I think the story was much more interesting than what we eventually got. And again, I think that Palpatine, once Carrie Fisher passed away and they couldn't make her at the forefront of the final movie the way they wanted to, they changed things up, and everything became kind of it just didn't work. And I don't think the Rise of Skywalker is a real story. I don't think there's a real story there. And they certainly don't fulfill the promise of what they set up. And I do think it would have been better. I think Rise of Skywalker is an incredibly disappointing movie. And it's not because I don't like J.J. Abrams. I think I look at all films on their own merits, and I think that the Rise of Skywalker just misses the mark. And the idea that Rey would take on the moniker of Skywalker at the end doesn't make any sense. It's weird. It just doesn't work. But yeah, I do think it would be better. But I want to thank you so much for supporting the channel that way. Thank you so much. But yes, I don't know. Stubble McShave says, have you thought of doing a mini-series on whining about movies? I think Shogun would be a good choice, but it probably takes 3 days to watch since it's 9 hours, but maybe she's seen it already. That's a good idea. If I was going to show Elizabeth, she would really like Shogun. That's a great idea. I wonder, I don't know if Elizabeth is watching, but just in case, look at that picture. I got to get this blown up into I got to have this painted. I have to have this framed. That's hilarious. But yeah, I think it's a good idea. And then Stubble also says, do you think Hollywood will do more animated movies and TV series until you can work on set in a more traditional way? A lot more of animated shows and movies can be done remotely. Well, I can say that that's what I've been working on, is an animated show, and it definitely is being done remotely. It's been done remotely and very internationally as well, and it's been very interesting to watch that process, which I think is great. But the problem is animation takes a long time. So it takes much longer than live action stuff does. So maybe, we'll see. Eventually, I think people are going to get a handle on this, and productions will resume. We'll see how it works out in New Zealand. They were able to sort of stamp out coronavirus, so we'll see where they wind up. It'll be interesting to see where they wind up, to be honest. I don't know. Back to the letters. Let's see what we have as far as letters are concerned. David Miller. I already read that. I already read David Miller's letter, so I don't want to read it again. Hang on. Hold, please, while I catch up. This one comes from Justin Meeks. Justin Meeks. Hey, Rob, longtime fan, first-time writer. I just wanted to know if you have a collection of video discs. I had heard of laser discs, but I had never heard of video discs till about 10 years ago. I started buying select ones for friends as gifts like The Empire Strikes Back and The Dark Crystal, just simply as pieces of nostalgic art for display purposes. Any backstories you can tell me about these beauties? Now, I am not sure what you mean when you say video discs. I would assume, if you're not talking about CDVs, CD video, there's CD video, video discs. Are you talking about RCA Select Division CED discs that come in the plastic? So I'm only assuming that's what they are. Let me, there are laser discs. Laser discs were introduced to the consumer market in the late 70s, believe it or not. Seattle and I think Houston, Texas were the two test markets. And that was all put out by MCA, Universal, MCA Disco Vision. And then, of course, taken over by Pioneer later. So laser discs were around from the late 70s to just the beginning of the aughts, the 2000s. Then they were really replaced by DVDs and later Blu-rays. But RCA had a different kind of disc format, and I think that's what you mean. And a CED disc, which stood for capacitance electronic disc, it was like the same size as a laser disc. It was basically an LP, but it came inside a big plastic sleeve. And the sleeve would have artwork. It was a big sticker that would wrap around. And what you would do is, the disc was in the sleeve, you'd stick the entire sleeve in the player, and then you'd pull the sleeve out, the plastic sleeve out, and the disc was inside. And then you would play it. And it was dope. I mean, I'll tell you something. I got a CED player for the express purpose. At the time, I'm still obviously a big James Bond fanatic, but my friend Mike Schertz and I were collecting all the Bond films on VHS. But you couldn't get On Her Majesty's Secret Service. It hadn't been released. And the first time it was ever released to home video was on as a CED disc. So I went and bought our player, our CED player that was never rented from the video store I was working at, Video Space. I want to say this was in 83. And then I was able to get On Her Majesty's Secret Service. So I think that's what you mean by video discs. But yeah, I still have a few. I still have a Clockwork Orange. I still have a lot of my laser discs as well. They're over there. I got to move them. But yeah, I still have my laser discs, and I'm a fan. I mean, but the CED system, they skipped. They had problems. It was not the most stable of formats. It was never going to replace Laserdisc, unfortunately. Omar94 sent in another letter that I have to read. The ongoing controversy of Indiana Jones on top of a German U-boat. Hi, Rob. A few weeks ago, the topic on the plot hole from Raiders of the Lost Ark about the U-boat came up. This has me wondering about other major plot holes from high-profile movies. Two movies in particular have huge plot holes that nobody really talks about, so I wanted to bring them up. The first movie with the huge plot hole is Citizen Kane. The whole plot of the movie is to find out what Rosebud means. That's the plot hole. Nobody hears Orson Welles say Rosebud, as he said it very quietly and when he was alone. The nurse came in and after he died. That meant nobody could have heard him say it. How did people find out about Rosebud, and being that it was the last thing he said? The second movie is the original 1933 King Kong and also the 2005 Peter Jackson remake, I guess. In the original movie, Kong is brought back to New York from Skull Island to be the eighth wonder of the world. That's the huge plot hole. How is it possible to bring Kong back to New York? Kong is a giant ape, so there's no way he would have fit on a ship. And how would people be able to bring him into a big city like New York? Through the busy streets and somehow get him inside a theater with doors too small for him, for people to see without anybody noticing. Come on, man, it's the scene, Doc. They have in the back of the theater, they have giant doors that open up so you can build those those theater sets. That's what I like about Kong Skull Island, as the movie takes place almost all on Skull Island, with Kong staying there at the end, and it didn't make sense to bring the giant ape back to the mainland. Those are major plot holes that have never been explained, unlike Raiders of the Lost Ark's U-boat plot hole, where that plot hole got explained, as there is a deleted scene explaining it, as well as the Marvel Comics adaptation showing the deleted scene. Thanks, live long and prosper. Well, here's the thing. When it comes to Rosebud, I just got the idea that I had was that he was sick, he was probably delirious, and he wasn't just saying, we just didn't see it off camera. It's not too much of a stretch to make a leap that he would have said Rosebud at other times, being delirious, being close to death. I got the idea from the movie that although we saw him say it in his last breath, he had been saying it. That's how people knew what it was. So, see, here's another thing that I think about when it comes to things like Rosebud or what you were just saying. I think there's a lot of times where people take things literally. And I think in the case of that, it can be inferred because other people did, in fact, know about it, which means that in the course of his sickness, he had probably said Rosebud a lot. I don't think that just because we only saw his last breath, that was like the only time he said Rosebud. So I think that's where you have to assume that he'd been saying it over and over again in his delirium. Because when people are sick, they do repeat things. So I didn't have a problem with that. And I don't necessarily think it's a plot hole. But King Kong, like, you know, you saw in the, like in Dino De Laurentiis' King Kong, they put King Kong in the hold of a boat. You know, in a big freighter. You could fit an ape in there, but I think the other questions you ask are legit. But I think that you have to, there are certain things in movies you have to just kind of go with. I just assume that, you know, they were able to do those things. I don't know if they were plot holes. It didn't shatter my disbelief. I could be wrong. This comes from Liam Kerrigan, another one of our people in Japan. Hi, Rob. First of all, belated happy birthday. Hope you had a great day despite the current situation. Actually, here in Japan, it has been quite chaotic. Though the virus hasn't reached my hometown yet, people are scared for about a month now, and I've been working from home. Anyway, I wonder if the outbreak could have a positive effect on movie and TV trends in the long term. From about the mid-2000s onwards, there's been a big trend in Hollywood that dark and gritty is the way to make big money at the box office. Most people point to the success of The Dark Knight, a decent but overrated movie in my opinion, as the catalyst for this, but I actually think it began earlier with 2006's Casino Royale, taking my beloved James Bond down a much meaner, darker path. To pass the time here in Japan, I've been rewatching all the Bond movies, some of which I'd never actually seen before. And I realized that Roger Moore is my favorite James Bond. And this probably sounds like heresy coming from a Scotsman, I know. Maybe it's because I know Roger Moore was such a nice guy in real life and genuinely loved the character. But there's a charm, a positivity, and a sense of joy about his Bond that we just don't have anymore. Daniel Craig is a fine actor, but he seems so damn miserable all the time. I don't disagree with you. Would it really hurt for him to just stop, make an occasional quip, seduce a beautiful lady, or just smile for a change? It's the same with Superman. Henry Cavill's great in the role, but whilst I rewatch Christopher Reeve movies several times a year, I find it really hard to rewatch Cavill films. It's no slight on him, it's just the character spends so much time wallowing in self-pity. And then there's Star Trek. Deep Space Nine showed in the 90s that we can take Trek into a dark place but still remain overall positive in our outlook. Yet in Discovery and more recently Picard, we have shows that seem to go out of their way to make the characters miserable and broken. Whether it's violently killing off beloved minor characters from past shows or giving characters trauma, bereavement, or addiction issues that serve no narrative purpose, modern Trek seems to revel in misery. I think when we finally emerge from this pandemic, we'll all need a big dose of positivity. We need to laugh, to cheer, and to reconnect with the things we love about life. So what do you think, Rob? Will we see a return to a Roger Moore Bond, a Christopher Reeve Superman, or a Star Trek show that doesn't leave me calling the doctor to ask for stronger antidepressants? I really see this as a great opportunity for Hollywood to pivot back to a more upbeat and positive outlook, and hopefully that has a knock-on effect for general populations. Do you think it's possible? As always, Rob, thanks for all you do. Stay safe and all the best. Liam Carrington. Well, Liam, man, I certainly hope so. I mean, I think you nailed it. I think one of the biggest failings of Star Trek as we know it now is how dour and depressing it's become. It really has. And I find it frankly inexcusable. That's not what the franchise ever was supposed to be. And they revel in it. You know, the idea is that there's Cthulhu-like AIs that want to snuff out all intelligent life. It just, there's no, you know what I'm missing from Star Trek? Joy. I got joy from Star Trek. And modern Star Trek has held no joy for me. You know, even Star Trek Beyond, like Kirk's like, I'm bored. I don't like this. When the Star Trek characters are living an adventure that we all would love to live in. And when you're watching Star Trek and it's dour and dark, and that's another reason people like Picard. Picard. People liked Pike because he was having a good time, you know. And it seemed like number one and Spock was having a good time. Yeah, it's just crazy. They need to bring that back. Justin Anderson is here. Hang on a second before I get to Justin. So Liam, yeah, I think we're going to see more positivity. But look, I like dark stories. But when you take beloved franchises and make them into some dark, twisted versions of themselves, what good is that? You know, Star Trek always put a smile on my face. It does not now. Nor has it in quite some time. Not in a decade. Not in 11 years. Hey, Rob, I hope you and your loved ones are well during these unprecedented times. As a fellow imagination connoisseur, and especially during these difficult times, my mind has drifted to thinking about what announcements in the imagination connoisseur space I'm most hoping to hear about this year. Ooh, this is good. Thinking about streaming, cinema, books, comics, and collectibles. For myself, the announcements I most want to hear are projected media, the detailed future of the Star Wars movie. Unwritten media, the release date of The Winds of Winter. On toys and collectibles, the Hot Toys Bespin Han Solo. You and me both, son, to go to my bed next to my Bespin Leia. How about for yourself? What are the announcements across the various facets of imagination that you would most like to hear about this year? Take care, have fun. Justin, the Aussie Samurai. Ooh, that's a good question, Justin. I would love it if David Gerald would finally finish his War Against the Tor books. I think I've wanted the fifth book for 25 years now or something. I hope he finishes it. I would like, in my own life, I'd like to be able to get Free Enterprise off the ground, Free Enterprise, the original, where I could either buy it back or find the money to put it in 4K and do my definitive version of the film and put that one to bed so people can see it in the way I wanted them to see it. That. I'd like to get the Lord of the Rings movies in 4K. I hope they finish those. I'd like to see those get done. I want to see Justin Boone's The Stand miniseries. I know it's on CBS All Access, but man, I can't wait to see the new Stand miniseries. I really cannot wait. I would like to see, I would love to see Hot Toys make that Millennium Falcon cockpit finally. I'd really like to get that. They're killing it. One of the things that I really wanted was a 22-inch model of the Eagle, the laboratory Eagle with the booster rockets. That just dropped the beginning of May. Like to get that. I'm hoping that they make more 2001 toys. They're making more 2001 model kits and toys and prop replicas of HAL and that kind of stuff. I would really like to read the end of... Doesn't George R.R. Martin have 2 more books to go, though, before the end? I will read... I got to read the end of... I want to read his ending for Game of Thrones. I want to see a new Avengers movie announced. I mean, there's all these like I read that they were, again, the standard sites talking about Annihilation movie. I love Annihilation. I've got the omnibus right there. I'd love to see that happen. I'd love to see that. I would love to see a new creative team, new people be brought on board to work on Star Trek. I don't understand why they can't, unless they have some exclusive contract. I would like to see a whole new creative team with a whole new take on Star Trek be allowed to make, say, a feature film. I think that'd be great. I would love that. But an interesting thing to ponder. What do you guys want? What are you guys thinking of? That was great. What a great letter you've sent me there. This letter comes from Kurt A. Kurt A says, 1938 Superman was kind of a jerk. Last year, I'd subscribed to DC Universe Online, mainly because I wanted to read DC Comics, something that I really didn't do during my comic book reading days. I was much more into Marvel Comics as a kid. I started with Superman 1, which premiered June 1938 and read up to issue 9. I have to say that this version of Superman is quite a bit different than the Silver or Bronze Age depictions. In these early issues, Superman's origin is different. His powers are different, and his personality is different from the version most of us know and love. The planet of his birth, Krypton, does not explode. It simply dies of old age. A friendly scientist, not his father. Oh no, it was still his father. I think that was just a mistake. Places the infant Superman into a spaceship, sending it to Earth. When his rocket ship lands on Earth, it's a passing motorist, not the Kents, who discover the infant Superman and place the child in an orphanage. As an adult, Clark Kent works for the Daily Star, not the Daily Planet. And as far as superpowers go, Superman couldn't fly, didn't have heat ray vision, and didn't have X-ray vision. There's no mention of super breath, super speed, or any other dozen abilities that he would later employ. There's no mention of him being harmed by kryptonite. He's strong, though, and is capable of bending steel bars. He can leap 1/8 of a mile. Lastly, he's bulletproof with only a shell burst capable of piercing his skin. This link shows some of his abilities. All right, this is a Cora link. I'll put this into the whatchamacallit. Let's put that in here. Here's that link. So there you go. This early Superman is a jerk. Perhaps he grew up in an orphanage. He's a bully who terrifies ordinary citizens as well as crooks, and he casually beats up on people, usually mocking them as he does so. Superman also spies on people a lot. In these early issues, he's far from being the big old Boy Scout. The big blue Boy Scout. What was I trying to say? He would later become. And oh, by the way, Lois is a jerk too. She mocks Clark as being a sniveling weakling, a coward, and totally unworthy of even being her friend. I guess if there's a moral to this story, it's that taking a snapshot of a character in a specific time frame will likely not be a fair representation of the character. In other words, you can cherry-pick facts to sway an audience. I'm reminded of your recent talk about The Empire Strikes Back and how various individuals have cherry-picked one or two negative reviews to claim that The Empire Strikes Back was divisive or not liked that much. Real fans know what's true. Superman is a big blue Boy Scout because there are decades of Superman comics where he acts that way. Similarly, The Empire Strikes Back was not divisive. It was a monster hit, a cultural tour de force that almost everyone loved. Anyway, it's just a thought. Happy birthday, Rob. Live long and prosper. Kurt A., the Bronze Age slacker. Well, Kurt, thank you very much for that. And yes, I agree with you 100%. This letter comes from Ethan Kaplan. Writes in, hello, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. Did anyone ever tell you that you are just the most amazing person? No. Even though I haven't actually met you in person, watching you over the years, and most especially last night during your birthday hangout, I felt that you were someone I had known for the longest time. This is Ethan, the younger guy from last night's birthday hangout. For those of you who don't know, I did a Zoom birthday hangout where a lot of people came, and it was a blast. It was hilarious meeting a lot of you. Once again, thanks to Roberto Suarez for hooking it up and the Richard for getting that party started. It was a blast. I mean, Captain Brad showed us how the ferry that he captains was there, and Willow Yang showed up. It was amazing, and meeting you all was great. I think, by the way, I might do something like that. I don't know, I have a Patreon, but I don't do much with it. And I was thinking about maybe doing something with that. Like, I haven't done much with it, or if I don't do Patreon, just having some kind of a meetup, like, and I'll do differing ones because a lot of the audience for these chats are overseas. So I might do like a morning Zoom meetup, like a live meetup. Because another thing that people have said, sorry, I will get to the rest of your letter, but a lot of what people have said to me about, and it's a valid criticism. I mean, it is work, and you are doing these shows. It's you obviously the financial aspect of these shows is something that is a reality, and it helps me do these things. It helped me buy lights and come into the Robservatory and buy extra cameras. And Campia puts a lot of money into things. Like for the Robservatory, there's a lot of money I need to spend to make it the way that I want it to be. And, that's all part of it all. But it was really fun to meet up with people and not worry about reading letters, because there's technicalities or technical issues that go along into doing all this, and it was so much fun just to be able to like hang out. So it would be nice to maybe do once or twice a month, and I would do them at different times, like start one at 10 in the morning on a Saturday, so people that are in Europe, like Vesna in Sarajevo, and Joseph, or anybody that wants to participate there. And then of course you've got Cal Swack Props is in Malaysia, so there's a lot of people that if I change it up, so did one in the morning and then one at night, we could get different people. But it went so well that look out for that. I'm going to start doing that. I think I might do one before the end of this month. So if anybody has any thoughts on that. Anyway, this is Ethan, the younger guy from last night's birthday hangout. I remember the other day on your show you talked about the Post-Geek Singularity and how much it means to you. Specifically, what struck to me was when you talked about no matter who we are, what we look like, and how much we dislike a movie, show, or video, everyone is a proud piece of the Post-Geek Singularity community. This was very wonderful to hear, and I found out for myself how true and magical those words were last night. I was the only teenager when I joined, and I realized, oh my, I'm the only teenager in here. But last night I was smiling so much, I felt so welcome, and I felt like I knew everyone for years. But in the hangout last night, we were talking about film festivals after I brought up Seattle. You brought up the Seattle International Film Festival. Well, I'm not sure if you heard me say this, but in my video production class, we did a field trip to the film festival, and it was one of the best experiences ever. Reika, I can't pronounce Reika, Zabachi, who was there, won an Academy Award for Best Documentary Short. She did a great presentation. I even sucked it up and got a little courage to ask her a question in front of the audience. I said, I could ask this to 100 different people and get a different answer every time. In your eyes, what is the job of a director? And I got an amazing response. I'm in high school, and I am someone who is always thinking about the future, college and beyond. One thing over the last week, while I've become more and more... I think you maybe said last week or last year, while I've become more and more apparent to do is networking, meeting new and as many people as I can who all love the same things I do. As a kid, asking a question to an Academy Award winner was incredible, but the thing about events like film festivals I discovered was the natural and equally amazing opportunity for meeting new people. It makes me wonder, what was it like for you when getting into Hollywood? Was there someone who guided and showed you things? People like you and John Campia are the two main people I watch that get me excited about what's to come. Robert, you're an amazing guy, and I cannot say this enough. It was an incredible honor to speak to you, and I hope to shake your hand sometime in the future. If I ever sent in a tip to either of you or John's show, the name you will read will simply say one letter, E, for Ethan. That'll be me. You are the master of fun and wonder. You are the existential Mr. Rogers. Sincerely, Ethan Kaplan. Well, first of all, Ethan, what a great letter to get. Thank you, and thanks for coming in. Here's been my experience in life. When I was a kid, when I was 13 years old and I got my VCR, I've told this story a lot on this channel, but I started going to this video store, and back then there were no video stores. And the video stores that were there were very mysterious, boutique-y places because VCRs are really expensive. And I had got one for my bar mitzvah. That's what my grandfather got me for my bar mitzvah, because that's all I wanted. And so I was this 13-year-old kid who had bar mitzvah money and was going to buy videotapes, and it was expensive back then. Blank videotapes were $30 a piece. There were two guys at that video store named Bud Warner and Steve Pitcher. And I haven't talked to them in ages. I'd love to. I mean, it's been decades. But they kind of took me under their wing, and they were much older than I was. I became friends. I used to go to Steve's house all the time and hang out, him and his girlfriend. And Bud Warner got me my first bootleg videotapes. He got me Dawn of the Dead and Maniac. He had everything that wasn't even available. I don't know where he got it. I didn't ask. But I always had young people who took me under their wing. And there was nothing weird or nefarious about it. Nobody was untoward. No, I never had anybody. It was not now people would say, like, why are you friends with some guy in his 30s and you're 13? It wasn't like that. It was totally, they liked the fact that I was really interested, and I was fairly articulate, and I could speak. I was used to speaking to adults. So I was not bashful or shy, and I guess I had interesting things to say. And I was doing things like starting when I was 10, I was riding the metro buses into downtown Seattle and exploring the city with my friend Jeff Swafford. So we kind of knew how to handle ourselves. But there were plenty of people. I'll give another shout out to when I was writing my high school movie review column. There was a woman in Seattle named Louise Hathaway. And back in the 80s, it was very different now. There was the National Screen Service Corporation that used to publish all the movie posters. They had offices in different regions around the United States. And Washington State had a very healthy, like, I knew all the distributors, the people that owned the movie theaters. I would go to screenings, exhibitor screenings that I wasn't supposed to go to because of my friend Craig Hyland. But a woman like Louise Hathaway, she would see me at screenings, and by this time I was 16, and she's like, well, you're so articulate, and I'll get you, you can interview people, and she would get me like interviews with Carrie Elwes or Helena Bonham Carter for things like Jane. What was the name of the movie? Why am I drawing a blank on that movie? Helena Bonham Carter, Lady Jane, and Martin Brest, the director of Beverly Hills Cop. I got to go to his hotel room and interview him for my high school newspaper. So I constantly had adults. I told this story on Inglorious Trexperts, but there was a guy at Paramount named Eddie Egan, who's still around today. He was at NorwestCon, which was a science fiction convention. This was it either was just before 1984, it might have been 83. Whenever NorwestCon was before 1983 or 1984, I met him, and he was there promoting Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, and I came up to him, and I was like 16 years old, and I'm sitting there talking to him, and he's like, well, kid, I'll make sure you get invited to what's called the all media screening. So when they have the movie screenings for all the media in the cities, like in all the critics and the local news, they would have, or radio stations, whatever. And I'm like, sure. Oh no, months and months go by, and Eddie Egan made sure that Paramount sent me a ticket to go see Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. He didn't have to do that. So I had met people along the way, and because of the Seattle Film Festival especially, I would get an annual pass, and I met a lot of, I was like the youngest person that was going to the Seattle Film Festival. I was a teenager, but I was interacting with people that were much older than I was. And they never like, I'm not going to talk to this kid. We were all part of the same fraternity and of Seattle film fanatics. So I was lucky, and networking, it's all about, like, I didn't know anybody in LA. I had my friend Taylor White, who was already here, but it was just that ability to, a few things, never be afraid to go up to talk to somebody. And when you go up to talk to somebody, you've got to be present. You have to do things like, when you shake someone's hand, I know it seems silly, you look that person in the eye and you give them a firm handshake. And you say, and call people, if you meet, like when I met Paul Verhoeven at the Seattle Film Festival, I didn't go up to him and say, hey, Paul. I said, Mr. Verhoeven, and I looked him in the eye and shook his hand and have something to say. Walk up. In that case, it was Flesh and Blood had just come out, and I walked up to him, and I told him how much I enjoyed the film, and I said I was very happy that he came to the Seattle Film Festival because I had seen many Dutch films for the very first time at the Seattle Film Festival, including his movie The Fourth Man, which is a great thriller. If you like Basic Instinct, The Fourth Man is great as well. But it's all in the way, it's all in how you treat people. Like, for instance, there's this kid Zach. When we were working on the Star Trek Blu-rays, he wanted to intern, and he came through somebody at CBS, and we're like, But when we met him, came from a great family, very well-spoken, really smart kid. He kept after us. He's like, can I come in and help on this Star Trek stuff? And he did. And he was great. And he was networking with us. He kept after us. And again, he was He was in high school, and then he went off into college. I was directing these short films for this girl. I called him up and said, come be my PA. And people like to help other people that are smart, that are interested, that are savvy, that they know they can tell are going places. And that requires a certain skill set. You have to understand how to work with people. Nowadays I've met a lot of people. It's unfortunate that I don't know what the difference is, but whenever I would go up to somebody, I always went up to them not knowing. I mean, I knew a lot, but I didn't want. My job was not to try and impress them or teach them or me conveying to them how much I knew. Whenever you go up to somebody, you're there to learn from them. And if you do that, if you go up with that kind of attitude, and look, learning how to talk to people is a three-dimensional skill. It takes a lot of different skills. I worked in retail from a very young age, so I was also used to dealing with the public. And I learned how to read people, and that's another skill. You can't overstay your welcome and things like that. But don't ever think that just because you're a teenager, that doesn't mean that you have nothing to offer and that people won't speak to you. It's all about your approach. It's all about what you want out of that. Everybody likes somebody who's smart and intelligent and asks them smart and intelligent questions. There's nothing better than that. And like I've told people, whenever I met a celebrity or something, I always try and lead by telling them something that I really like in their work that isn't like, when you meet Harrison Ford, I've never met Harrison Ford, but if I met Harrison Ford, I would not lead with, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I wouldn't say that. I'd be like, I got to say I'm a huge fan of Hanover Street. Or something like that. But I want to thank you for writing the letter, Ethan, and you're welcome anytime. So if I do another, and by the way, you know what? You showed up. You came into the Zoom chat. That shows that you've got what it takes. I mean, that's there's a lot to be said for that, man. How many people wanted to but didn't? That showed that you had the wherewithal, that you got to be a mover and shaker. You got to make things happen because no one's going to give it to you. Oh, there's a good one. So Brian Eng, this is a good question. Brian Eng says, personal question, Rob, kind of related to xenomorph lovin'. Were all of your girlfriends on the attractive side, or were a few of them not conventionally attractive, like plain Janes or a little chubby even? Maybe best friend material that you tried to take to a romantic level. Of course, I'm asking this to see if you'd drop the D on Pearl the Xenomorph. Well, for those of you who might be new to this channel, this is an ongoing discussion about whether or not a human being could have a successful relationship with an alien. And if so, where do you draw that line? So, like, if, let's say, you could somehow relate to a xenomorph, would you ever, if a xenomorph was sentient and they were smart, could you as a human being ever get into a relationship with, say, a creature that looked like a xenomorph? Could you do that? I don't think I'm that progressive. But if you bring it back to, say, like Amanda and Sarek, and you could see how a Vulcan human relationship could work out, I could see myself doing that. And I think it's a very interesting question. I mean, human beings can't even get over our prejudice against the melanin level in people's skin. Like, we're still judging people like, oh, so you came from a hot region of your ancestry for thousands of years. It was from a hotter region of the planet than I'm from, so your skin is darker, so somehow you're different than me. We can't even get past that. I've always believed that the human race means it's a global issue. And what an interesting question. Okay, here's the thing. I would like to say that my taste in people is pretty diverse. So, like, when you ask, all of the girls that I've dated, I would say are attractive to me. And I found like I find a wide range of, like, I like women of all shapes, sizes, colors, and creeds, but I think that they're beautiful to me. So I would say that I've been very lucky that for the most part, all the girlfriends that I've had since, I got my first real serious girlfriend when I was 13. I've found them attractive, but I'm not only attracted to what people would say are conventional, I don't know, California bikini beauties. I like girls of all, just like I like all people. But I've found, like, I don't think anybody can date or go out with somebody that you don't find attractive in some way, because that's all part of it. But like I'll flat out I'll tell you, I mean, flat out, the thing that I am first and foremost a face person. I love people's faces. So I have found that that's the first thing that I'm attracted to is someone's face. And not just their eyes or their smile, but it's a combination of all of those things. I'm a face person. And which has served me well over the years, because I find so many people's faces interesting. And when it comes to I've always liked my standards of beauty were developed by watching Star Trek and The Twilight Zone and movies from the 60s, where James Bond movies, where the women were feminine. They were not thin. I like feminine women. I like curvaceous women. I like Zoftic women. I mean, I like women that look like, more of a va-va-voom thing rather than. That's not to say I don't like athletic women too, but I was shaped by the 60s, by the women of the classic series. But that's interesting. You're asking if I would drop the D on Pearl the Xenomorph. Could I actually have sex with a Xenomorph? I don't think I can. I would be too revolted. I don't think that I could ever. I mean, if you're asking me for real, I think it's a really interesting question to ponder. Like, it's funny, we laugh at it, but if in fact human beings can become a spacefaring race, and we met, like for instance, Delenn on Babylon 5, obviously Sheridan. When Delenn, I would have hooked up with Delenn. I would have hooked up when she was full Minbari. I would have totally tapped that. I would have dropped the D on Delenn before even she went through her chrysalis and became more human looking, because I mean she was beautiful. Like, I would have no problem with that. I couldn't go into the realm of a Xenomorph. Even if the Xenomorph was like the smartest person I knew, I would still have to have. I mean, I hate to say it, but I would say that, knowing myself, I would be limited. I would be limited in my ability to move out of the realm of. Someone would have to look reasonably human, I think, for me to go there. But when I think about, Coriander, or Coriandar, it's got like coriander, Starfire in the Teen Titans with her big old eyes. I mean, that would be like, if I was going to date an alien from the planet Tamaran, it would definitely be Starfire. Starfire would be like my dream alien girl. But I don't know how much further I could push it, like Mantis in Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, come on, or Gamora, who everybody would date them, right? But yeah, to answer your question, I couldn't go that far, man. I couldn't go full Xenomorph, and I hate to say it. I know myself that would be a shortcoming. I know that would make me not as woke or as progressive as possible, but I don't think as a human being I could go full on Xenomorph. I just couldn't go there. I couldn't go there. I don't know. This letter comes from Josh Crichton. Dear Robert, Meyer, Burnett, and the crew. My name is Josh Crichton, for those who haven't had the pleasure of chatting with me either on Twitter or in the chat room on YouTube before Robservations. I thought I would share a bit about myself through a top 20 list, so you guys can get to know me better from where I live and my interests in life. So without further ado, here's my top 20 list about myself. I'm currently 25 years old. Number 19, my favorite subject in school was social studies and history. Number 18, I live in Rochester, New York. which is the home of George Eastman and Kodak, Susan B. Anthony, Lou Graham of Foreigner, Genesee Brewery, and Nick Tahoe's home of the Garbage Plate. I was a radio DJ on radio station 90.9 WIRQ during my senior year at, this has got to be Irondequoit? I can't even pronounce Irondequoit. Is that an Indian name? I don't know. High school. 16. Here's a question for everyone. Have you guys seen the movie The Lady in White, directed by Frank Loggia? If so, I live close by its legend. I like that movie, by the way. I saw Frank Loggia's Fear No Evil when it came out. I saw it at the Coliseum Theater the night it opened, and I have to say I wasn't a big fan of it. I came to appreciate it later. There's that on The Lady in White, but I do like The Lady in White. I think that might be his best movie. And here is another letter that you put in this one. So, my first movie ticket I bought with my own money was The Dark Knight. Number 14, my earliest movie theater experience that I can remember was seeing Star Wars The Phantom Menace. That's a good one. Number 13, I have an alter ego I never knew about until 3 years ago, which is something I am going to touch upon in my first top 10. What does that mean? 12, I believe that the first 3 Star Trek movies are better than the original trilogy. Ooh, do you? 11, I'm currently reading Dune and the House of Atreides trilogy before Dune comes out in the theaters. Number 10, I'm excited about the upcoming Dune movie. Bring on those hot toys, son, because I want a Lady Jessica in her Space Nun outfit. Guess I've never been so excited for toys in my life. I don't know if Hot Toys is doing it, but McFarlane announced that they will be. 9, my favorite TV show of all time is That Metal Show. Hashtag Rise Your Horns, Metalheads in the Burnettwork. I wonder if Dieter Bastian knows all about that. 8, my celebrity crush is, okay, get ready, Scarlett Johansson. 7, a place I've never been to but would like to. It's a 3-way tie. Nashville, because it's a music city and I enjoy country music. Las Vegas for the UFOs. And Los Angeles, Sunset Boulevard, the Rainbow, and the Blonde Ladies. Number 6, my dream person interview is Alex Cooper. Number 5, my alter ego is McLovin from Superbad because that's who I kind of look like in real life. Before that, people called me the Crazy Crichton. Number 4, I'm interested in writing a novel someday and making movies. I also have a couple ideas in the works. Number 3, if I could work with anyone in Hollywood today, it would be Margot Robbie, Bryce Dallas Howard, and Aaron Cummings. Well, let me tell you, I think that Bryce, I don't know if she knows Bryce, but Aaron Cummings knows Margot Robbie. So I can just, wait a minute. Just so I can cast her as a stripper named Cookie Montgomery with a movie idea I love with the backing track of that scene being Used to Love Her by Guns N' Roses. I don't know if she would dig that, though. Number 2, if I could be interviewed by anyone like a celebrity, author, director, or news anchor, it would be Katie Tour of MSNBC because I'm interested in politics and current events. What about you, Robert Meyer Burnett? What about guys? What about the viewers of the network? What about you, Post-Geek Singularity? Send in your answers and thoughts on these questions. Okay, and here's my big and almighty one. The thing you should know about me, I've hinted at it a bit throughout the letter. Number 1, I love music. So in my life, I'm going to share with you guys the bands and artists I listen to. Phish, The Grateful Dead, Led Zeppelin, Dio, Black Sabbath, The Darkness, Pearl Jam, The Melvins, Screaming Trees. Yes, Rob, I thought I nearly lost you. You did not. I like all this music. Aerosmith, Kiss, Sammy Hagar, Bad Company, Cheap Trick, Mudhoney, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Bush, The Cult, Motorhead, Yes, Genesis, Peter Gabriel, Saxon, Dream Theater, Heart, Queen, Queen of the Stone Age, Queen's Reich, Shinedown, Rob Zombie, Marilyn Manson, Hailstorm, Stone Sour, Slipknot, Anthrax, Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth, Guns N' Roses, Scorpion, Deep Purple, Bob Marley, Rush, Triumph, AC/DC, The Rolling Stones, Poison, Crocus, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, REO Speedwagon, Y&T, Styx, Meatloaf, Ghost, Mastodon, Foo Fighters, Rammstein, and X, Japan, even though there's more. Bonus, my favorite documentary I ever saw was Sound City. Feel free to DM me on Twitter with your questions or comments. I hope you enjoy this. By the way, I have a second letter in the works this week to Rob and the crew. Sincerely, Josh Crichton. Well, thank you, Josh. Find Josh on Twitter. That is quite an impressive list of music. I will hand that to you, sir. That's a lot. Diverse taste, by the way, too. This next letter comes from Drew Douglas. Greetings, Rob. I promised you on your birthday I'd write you a letter. And since I'm a man of my word and I'm not at work today, here goes. Let's dive into a subject I know you and I are passionate about, physical media. I remember some time ago on an episode of the Inglorious Trexperts podcast where you and the other hosts were talking to former Paramount publicist Eddie Egan. I had no idea you were going to send this in. And how you asked him about what happened to the artwork that Bob Peake did for both Star Trek II and Star Trek III, and how they seemed to disappear from their respective promotional campaigns. That made me think about some of the purchases I made on DVD and Blu-ray in regards to Star Trek. I purchased all the films as DVD special editions, including the director's edition of the motion picture, which I still have, and they all had, for the most part, the original artwork on the packaging, including Bob Peake's previously missing posters for Star Trek II and Star Trek III. They did indeed. I later wanted the Star Trek films on Blu-ray and received them for Christmas one year, and much to my disappointment, they came in very plain-looking white boxes with generic blue lettering. I figured the individual cases and discs inside the box must have better artwork, right? Wrong. The DVD releases of the original series weren't much better in that they came in these plastic cases that I think were supposed to resemble tricorders, but they were rounded on the bottom and wouldn't stand up on their own on my shelf. I know about the old saying you can't judge a book by its cover, but this is physical media, and on top of that, it's the Star Trek physical media, damn it. I will freely admit I purchased the Star Trek 50th anniversary box set because I liked the artwork better, but it also didn't hurt that the set came with the animated series and a 50th anniversary pin. I have that as well. Is that wrong, Rob? Have you ever done anything similar? In an earlier super chat, I mentioned the Black Hole and whether or not it could be considered a disaster movie instead of a Star Wars ripoff. The artwork on my Black Hole DVD is utter shite, too. I recall the movie having a couple of great Vortex-themed logos. They do. Not only on the posters and early VHS releases, but on the toys as well. No such luck on the DVD. It looks like they use a very plain font that they probably ripped off from Microsoft Office Suite, in addition to the so-called black hole that looks as if they took a picture of someone with pink eye and put some funky Photoshop filter over it. And then for the ultimate insult, the picture of the Cygnus hovering over Earth? What the fuck? Earth isn't even in the movie. They can't all be done by Arrow or Shout Factory, I guess. Speaking of Shout Factory, I'm excited that they're releasing an Escape from L.A. Blu-ray. Yeah, I know it's not as good as Escape from New York, but anytime you can get more Snake Plissken also throwing in Steve Buscemi, Bruce Campbell, and Peter Fonda, that's all right by me. Hope you had a great birthday, Rob. Other YouTubers seem like they want to be a nerdy version of Rush Limbaugh. I think of you as being closer to Dick Cavett or Tom Snyder. I'll take it. Speaking of Snyder, I wonder if he was still alive. Could he have been a Post-Geek Singularity member? Tom Snyder, absolutely. I know he was friendly with Harlan Ellison and interviewed him several times. Well, there you go, Rob. I can't write in his office as Willow Yang or Stubble McShave, but rest assured I watch all the time, sometimes live, other times delayed, because sometimes you're on while I'm working, but I'm honored to be a part of this community. I think you've done a great thing here in fostering this post-geek singularity. I don't always agree with every single thing you say, but I like to think that 95% of the time, we, as you put it, park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. Sidebar, should we start an office-style pool and take bets to see how long it takes Dieter, shiny Bastion, to show us a Jennifer Lawrence tattoo? I'm also a dog lover, and I enjoy watching you give Gilbert and Tallulah treats. My girlfriend and I had two spaniels named Milo and Ollie. Sadly, after 7 years, our relationship ended about a year ago, and she does not allow me to see the dogs, which breaks my heart. So anytime they want to interrupt is fine with me, and it never fails to put a smile on my face. Also, if you would like a sixer with some of Wisconsin's finest beverages, I would be more than happy to send you some. Ooh, what is the best Wisconsin beverages? You know me, I love the local hooch. Cheers to you, Rob, and many happy returns. I'll try and write and chat more often. Well, thank you very much, Drew Douglas. It was very nice to get a letter from you, sir. It's always great to hear from new people. I think that's great. That is fantastic. So thank you for that. Let's see. This one is, again, our man Christopher McCulloch. Christopher McCulloch is here, ladies and gentlemen. He writes good letters. Mr. Burnett. Mr. Mao letter. Mr. Mao. MSSR. How do you say that? Misser? You say Misser? Missive? Misser? Mr. Mao's letter on his ruminations on America's fixation on apocalyptic and dystopian futures got me thinking about the development of the genres and the reflection of the societies that produce them. Hopefully, this will give Jeffrey a little less reason to despair about our lot, and at the very least, give more perspective. The post-war world was marked for its elan. The shared strife of such great bloodletting instilled a need for all concerned to create a new world order that would never allow the world to fall to such barbarism again. Science fiction during this time would reflect this utopianism. This was the age in which our great society would finally end the tribalism inherent in the human animal, to finally look to the great and unexplored frontier of space. The Earth of tomorrow's astronauts would unfurl not the flags of their tribe, but one depicting the planet from which they came. It was a heady time, and in America, the world saw the exemplar of the way forward. It might strike people strange today, but America's endeavors were considered the shared patrimony of the free world. Just look to the space program. What counted as the free world went by another name in its corollary, the West. The Cold War would twist every aspect of society around the conflict. The future was bright, so bright you gotta wear shades. The coming Holocaust would be the fixation of science fiction in one form or another. The Man in the High Castle, people don't often quite realize, deals with the inevitability of nuclear holocaust, as well as being a satire of America's post-war paternalism. While the nuclear standoff between the world's two superpowers would create the cult of self-annihilation in science fiction, the neat ideological divide would plant the seed for what would be the next phase of literature's ongoing apocalypse. While Russia would become even more remote and despotic, the U.S. government would be fostering an even more extreme belief in free enterprise. While my people would be reviving Lord of the Rings in the 60s, another set would do the same with the works of Ayn Rand. The nation-state had been the savior of the people during wartime and the architects of the New World. Its credibility at home would suffer innumerable blows during the 60s and 70s. The remedy for corruption and despotism was the remedy for corruption and despotism in this American century, capitalism. The world of tomorrow would no longer be concerned with lines on a map. It would be the purview of conglomerates, mega corporations, cyberpunk, the utopian belief in unfettered personal freedom and its conflict with the agents of repression are now the dystopia of the 80s and 90s. Tomorrow's dystopia is the still cyberpunk-ish, but the wasteland of tomorrow is environmental. Our long efforts to create a new Venus of this planet are finally paying dividends, and science fiction sees our end in every effort of science to tinker with the natural world. I'm anxious to see how this pandemic and the post-truth era will translate into our apocalypse. I expect a slew of new gravity's rainbows in our future. I found it heartbreaking that the example of America's downfall in fiction that Jeffrey brought up was more than 40 years old. These thought exercises are what we do, going over the terrible possibilities of life. It's healthy. Don't be afraid of it. As our society's problems change, we'll keep knocking them around in a litany of worst-case scenarios that show us what would become of us if we fail to overcome them, and what we could do or what we could become if we do. I, too, have traveled around the world a little, and I have found a curious incongruity between how foreigners I meet view our country and how we're told foreigners view our country. I can't explain why that might be, but the vagaries of the day and the differences between the macro and micro concerns of men and nations are certainly a part of it. America's pride in itself is often considered by its detractors a zero sum. Some of those detractors are even elected officials. But cynicism is the quick and easy path. Don't fall into it. Then again, who am I? Christopher, keep smiling through. Well, Christopher, another thoughtful and very interesting letter from you, sir. I know people are sending me things, and I will jump back into these things. And let's see, where was I? Julius Stubble. Julius Goodwin continues on with generous support of this channel. Thank you, sir. It is my honor to support in some small way. You're very much a scholar and a gentleman. Well, thank you, sir. And I like and respect you. I read a fan theory about Jar Jar being a secret Sith Lord, and it made way too much sense. Your thoughts? Well, I mean, if he's been undercover the whole time and playing everybody, kudos to him. I mean, talk about the next Phantom Menace. If Jar Jar Binks turned out to be a Sith Lord, he was playing the long game, I think that'd be awesome. I mean, hell, they could reveal that in The Mandalorian. I think that is... I like that idea a lot, to be honest. Brendan Sheehy sends in a super chat and says, Rob, what's your favorite Wes Anderson film? Well, as you all know, Elizabeth loves Wes Anderson. You know what? I'm a big fan. Like, I saw Bottle Rocket. I mean, I really like Bottle Rocket. I own all of Wes Anderson's movies on Blu-ray. You know, a lot of people, I mean, look, I love Rushmore. I flat out love Rushmore. I think Rushmore is great. But I think Rushmore, Wes Anderson was still sort of evolving. And I would say that for me, peak Wes Anderson, I look, the Grand Budapest Hotel is great. But I think my favorite might be The Life Aquatic. I love The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. I just think that movie, maybe it's because I grew up loving Jacques Cousteau, but there's just something about that. The characters, I love everything about it. I think that might be my favorite Wes Anderson movie. I think so. Stub McShave comes on and says, I love Terminator 2, but I hate the faulty sound of the dirt bike in the garage. John turns the throttle in a way that would produce 2 very long vrooms. The sound is 2 short vrooms. It may be a small thing, but it takes me out of the movie for a few minutes. You know something? I'll bet you that James Cameron might not have known that, because that seems like a detail that he... You know what? Now, I've never thought about that, but now you've said it to me, I'll never be able to forget it. So, thanks for that. Thanks for that. Which is awesome. Evan Newman is here. Okay, Rob, it's time to play a quick game of take one, leave one. Today, Sophie's choice is... Oh, dude. Today's Sophie's choice is John Carpenter's Escape from New York versus George Miller's The Road Warrior. So what's it going to be, Rob? Save Snake in his city or Max in his wasteland? Dude, oh man. That is a tough call. Okay, you know what? I'm going to make my pick. I'm making my pick. The Road Warrior versus Escape from New York. I think this language of cinema was more advanced by Road Warrior. And from a purely visceral standpoint, hell's a poppin' action, I've got to take Road Warrior. Because I thought Road Warrior was a truly breakthrough movie on a number of different levels. And Escape from New York was a great genre pastiche that I loved, but I think that Road Warrior advanced the art of cinema further. But what a choice, man. Wow, what a choice. But what a great drinking game to play. Keep sending those ones in, Evan. That's a great one. Francisco, I'm going to say Francisco. Metalana is here. Francisco Metalana is here and sends in a super chat and says, hey, I just watched Die Another Day and loved it. So much fun. I love Brosnan's 007 and great intro with Madonna. Thoughts on it? Underappreciated. Francisco, I can't go with you there. I love the first half of Die Another Day, and then it gets silly to me. I love the sword fight. I just can't get past the Korean general being transformed into Toby Stevens or whatever. I can't go there. I love the first half of it though. I do love the first half. It just gets too goofy, and the CGI of the windsurfing, the parasailing. Oh, but that doesn't mean you can't love it. You know, you can't love it. But I think it's half of a good movie. But it does have one of my least favorite Bond songs, I have to say. All Metal Mike is here. All Metal Mike says, great insights, Rob. Excellent show. Well, thank you, All Metal Mike, and thanks for the love. Liam in Japan is here. Just read your letter, Liam. Liam is asking if humans can hook up with grotesque alien beasts. Liam says, asking if humans can hook up with grotesque alien beasts. You've never been on a night out in Glasgow, have you, Rob? I've never been to Scotland. I would assume Glasgow is Scotland. Yes. I have not. But, oh, man. Keep in mind, that was Liam saying that. That was not me. Is Glasgow in Scotland? I think it is, right? Is there a Glasgow in Ireland that I'm missing? Wow. I cannot take any responsibility for that. All right, I got one last letter here. One last letter. Jason DeWolf writes in. Jason DeWolf says, "Hey, Rob, it's been months since I wrote a letter, and it's been one of those busy years, and I was sick for a month. I've got to say that your channel has only improved, and you still are as likable and entertaining as ever, with great perspective and dynamics with both Elizabeth as well as with Mr. John Campea." Well, thank you. "While the wife and I were down and just on the couch watching movies, I put in the recent Blu-ray of the 80s movie Raw Courage, starring Ronnie Cox, about these three guys going for a run in the desert only to be harassed and stalked by this crude weekend militia group. I don't know this movie. It's an okay movie to chill out to and fairly enjoyable, but man, the opening scene is such an odd directorial choice and was made worse as we had sat down to begin our supper while we watched the movie. There is this obtrusive close-up of Ronnie Cox's feet while he is putting Vaseline on them in preparation for his run. The shot is so close and it lingers way too long. It was pretty revolting while eating. It has to be one of the worst shots of all time. Curious to hear if you have any odd scenes from movies that weren't purposefully done to be off-putting, but you can recall that don't sit well for any reason. Keep it up, man. Stay safe and keep your vitamin D levels up. Jay Canada." What an interesting question. You know, nothing comes to mind. Nothing comes to mind right now. But someone's feet. Now I want to go see. I don't even know this movie. You know, I sat down with Ronnie Cox and interviewed him for the Chain of Command single disc set. The two-part episodes for Next Generation from season 3 on were released as single Blu-rays. And he was, what a delightful man. One of the nicest people I've ever met in Hollywood. What a great guy. But I got to look that one up. I don't know that film. You know, nothing comes to mind. A shot that just makes me cringe or is... I can't think of one. You know, nothing that really... I'm fascinated by things that are gross, so I'll watch those things. You know, I will. But there's nothing that I can think of that really grosses me out. But that's interesting. What an interesting question. No one's ever asked me a question like that before, so I unfortunately don't have an answer. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this brings me to the end of Robservations episode number 419. I want to thank all of you people for supporting the channel, and what a great bunch of letters and missives and all kinds of things. I want to thank everybody for making sure my birthday week was tremendous. I can't believe tomorrow's episode 420, dudes. I won't pull a Joe Rogan. I won't get stoned on this channel, but, you know, it's 420, dude. I got to say something, all right? And I want to thank everybody for the great birthday wishes. Once again, I love my dope Trinidad the Island Man and for all the great goodness that he did send Elizabeth and my way. Very much appreciated at this time, more than you possibly will ever know. But thank you very much. And I just want to thank everybody. What a great birthday. I think I am going to do these Zoom things. I'll probably do them twice a month. I'll do one early and then one late so we can get the different kinds of people doing it. It was really fun. Those Zoom things were really fun. And they were really easy to manage, and it was pretty cool. So let's plan on that sometime, maybe like on the 31st of May or something. I do have to do that, the live Comic-Con. I want to remind you that the Mainframe Comic-Con right here is coming back. It's live and online, May 30th and 31st. I don't know who I'm going to be interviewing yet, but I will be moderating a discussion with some people. I'm sure that will be a lot of fun. And I want to thank, of course, as always, my moderating staff, Mike Bodden, Detective Jim Boyers, his wife Heidi, Greg Smith, Louis Yu, Jordy Lyons, and the Richard. And I want to thank those guys for making this a better place to be. Of course, Whining About Movies will be back tomorrow. I don't know what our movie is. I will remind everybody, Whining About Movies on Wednesday is, in fact, The Empire Strikes Back. Elizabeth and I might be doing we might do a 2-bottler on The Empire Strikes Back, just because there's a lot to talk about. Celebrating its 40th anniversary, released on May 21st, 1980. So Whining About Movies on Wednesday is The Empire Strikes Back. We will be doing something tomorrow. I'm not sure what it is yet. So join us there. I'll be back on the John Campea Show tomorrow. I will be back on this show tomorrow as well for Robservations 420. And that brings me to an end of this episode of Robservations. What a fun episode. I thought, oh my God, there's nothing to talk about. And leave it to you guys to write really interesting, fascinating letters. So thanks for that, and thanks for being here. So I'm going to bring an end to this stream. And as always, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, as I always say, have a better day.